Good evening and welcome. This is a public hearing of the Zoning Board of Appeals of the City of Evanston. The zoning ordinance directs this body to hear applications for major variations, special uses, and appeals from decisions of the zoning administrator. Depending on the type of matter, the board will either make a final determination or send its recommendation to City Council. Melissa, will you call the roll, please?
Lisa Deacon, here. Mary McCauley. Scott Gingold.
Here.
Mary Beth Burns.
Here.
Violetta Cullen.
Present.
Mirna Aravallo.
Here.
And Kirill Miranchev.
With 5 members present, we do have a quorum. Also tonight are zoning planner Melissa Klotz and planning and zoning administrator Scott Mangum. This is a formal hearing, and there are rules that govern our proceedings. Most importantly, only one person speaks at a time, so all testimony may be accurately recorded. Anyone who wishes to address the board regarding any matter on the agenda will have the opportunity to do so at the appropriate time. Our procedure is to hear from staff on the documents on file and then receive testimony and other evidence from the applicant or appellant. Next, persons who wish to make a statement regarding the matter may do so at that time. Any person with a legal interest in property located within 500 feet of the subject property may present evidence, reasonably question witnesses, or seek a continuance of the hearing. When all supporting and opposing testimony and statements have been heard, the applicant or appellant will be given the opportunity for rebuttal or a closing statement. Then the board will close the record and begin deliberations. All testimony will be under oath. Although we do not apply the strict rules of evidence, please limit your testimony or statement to your personal knowledge. When you address the board, please state your name and address and sign in on the provided sheet. Our meetings are audio and video recorded. Please make sure that you are at a microphone when asking questions or making statements so that you can be properly recorded. All proceedings are subject to broadcast at a later date. Any matter not concluded at tonight's hearing will be continued to our next regularly scheduled meeting. We have a packed agenda tonight, 4 cases, and is 825 Church here. Okay, how about 1503 Church? And 3233 Central? And 2035 Dodge? Okay. Hopefully he'll be here later. All right. So what I'd like to do is anybody who plans on speaking tonight, can I have you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth throughout the course of these proceedings? Fantastic. First of all on the agenda tonight is our meeting minutes. Does anybody have any comments on those meeting minutes?
I thought they were very nicely typed.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of March 20th, 2018.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And with that, we're moving on to new business. We have 825 Church Street. And Melissa, will you read that case into the record, please? Oh, sorry.
I can
Scott.
handle that one,
Sorry.
Madam Chair. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. The request here is a special use permit for a Type 2 restaurant, Falcon Eddie's Barbecue, within the D2 zoning district. In this case, the ZBA does make a recommendation to City Council, who's the final determining body. City staff and DAPR have reviewed the request and are recommending approval. The documentation included within the staff report, and then additionally attachments, including the special use application, the plat, business summary, and the sustainability practices. That concludes the summary of the staff report. We're available for questions. Thank you.
All right. Will the applicant please come up and tell us a little bit about your project, please? Start with your name and address.
My name's James Pomerantz. My address or the business address?
Let's go with your business address.
825 Church, Evanston. And I own Bat 17, that's 1709 Benson in Evanston as well.
Okay. And tell us a little bit about what you're proposing.
Just opening a barbecue restaurant in the space where Dixie Kitchen used to be. And then there was a place called Yahala there for a short period of time. It's around the corner from my other business. The opportunity was good. I've been looking for a place to do a real Texas dry rub kind of menu, limited menu, order at the counter. Sit down, we call your name, come up and get it. Great brisket, ribs, chicken, pork. Simple.
Simple. And because that was a restaurant before, I'm assuming you're keeping the kitchen intact where
Yeah.
it was? And
Yeah, the
essentially-
kitchen was redone, completely redone about 18 months ago. When Dixie Kitchen closed, the landlord went in there and put about 600 grand into the kitchen.
Okay.
So it's gorgeous.
And it's got all the hoods necessary for the purposes of smoking things and all that good stuff. And I'm assuming that your waste is in the alley where it was for Dixie Kitchen?
Same place, yeah.
And deliveries happen in the alley as well? And then deliveries for customers, where is that going to take place? So your documentation says that you will have delivery via Grubhub. So where will those pickups take place?
They come in the restaurant and pick up the food and take them wherever, I don't know.
So they'll be parking on the street?
Yeah. They've been doing that at Bat 17 for years.
Okay. And how many employees will you have?
As few as possible. 10 maybe, 12 tops.
Okay.
And just figure 3 guys on the line, dishwasher and a counter person.
Okay. And do you have parking associated with the building for your space?
Personal parking?
Yeah. So for employees?
No, they have to use public parking.
Okay. And so it's your intention that they park in the public spots or take public transportation rather than parking on the street?
Correct, yeah. We offer them incentive to use the garages.
Okay. And are you doing anything to the outside of the building?
No,
Nope, it's all interior work?
correct.
Can you talk a little bit about service inside the restaurant? So will there be space for customers to walk in and sit down and eat?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, seating is for about 46, 48.
And will that be by wait staff or is
No,
that...
that's the reason for the zoning request.
Okay, that's
So-
why I'm asking the questions.
Yeah, no, it's, come in, go up to the counter, order your food, go sit down. We'll call you when it's ready. Come pick it up, eat it, put it neatly in the bins when you leave, and talk about how great it was, and then go home.
So, as a restaurant owner in the neighborhood and in Evanston, you're familiar with the city's litter collection and litter pickup plans? And,
Very much.
And you're prepared to comply with them for this space?
Of course.
You're asking for hours of operation I think it's from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. and then maybe 10 p.m. on the weekends. Is that correct?
Correct.
What are your hours of operation over at Bat 17?
We open at 11 a.m. Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. on Saturday and Sunday, and we're open till midnight weeknights and 1 a.m. on Friday and Saturday. And I have a 1 a.m., 2 a.m. license there. If we have special events going,
Right.
and we can stay open an hour later. But normally, it's midnight during the week, 1 a.m. On Friday and Saturday.
And the late hours at Bat 17 are primarily because you have a bar associated with it?
2 bars, yeah.
1, 2. Let's not quibble. Okay, and there's no bar at
No.
Falcon Eddies,
No, we're
right.
just going to serve beer and wine, but we're not, there's no liquor and no bar either.
Okay.
We're just going to have some cool beers from Texas and out west.
Okay. Other questions from anyone else?
Maybe I missed you saying this, but is there parking in the back of your location for deliveries and for yourself or your
There's
staff?
parking for delivery. All the deliveries come in back through
Oh, they
the
do.
alley.
Okay.
There's 3 spaces back there that myself and my partner can park our personal cars in there as per the landlord, but nobody else can.
So are you usually there, like either yourself or your partner is usually there? And then it's got space for your deliveries to come in?
Oh, yeah.
And it's got space for, I assume, Grubhub and them. Can they use the back door?
No,
No, they have to come in through
they
the
have to
front.
come in the front.
And your litter is in the back?
Correct.
Yeah. And when are your deliveries for your restaurant?
Monday through Friday.
Like early morning?
They come 8:30 to 4.
And you'll be opening for
Oh, yeah. Somebody will be there, sure.
8:30 in the morning till 4 p.m.?
Correct.
Wow, okay.
Anyone else? All right, is there anything else you'd like to add? All right, thank you so much. You can go ahead and have a seat. Is there anybody here to comment on this particular project? Would like to say anything? Okay. With that, we will go ahead and close the record and deliberate. Thoughts from the board?
This is garden variety type 2 application. So it seems like a great project to make use of a space that's not currently in use. It's nice that it's an existing Evanston business owner running the same type of business that's successfully been run in Evanston for the past many years.
Yep.
And I'm completely in favor, subject to the usual terms and conditions we recommend for this type of application.
I think that's a good summary, and I agree with those comments.
I'm good with the project.
I agree with the project. I think this is going to be one of the first of its type. I think every other location over there was like a waiter, waitress, sit down at the table type of thing. So this being fast food, it's going to be just slightly different, but hopefully it'll be a better use for the space. Stay a little longer.
I agree with all of that. It's also an easy one since we went from a type 1 to a type 2, so the change is minimal and everyone's used to the traffic and all that sort of stuff and deliveries and all that sort of stuff, so it's unlikely that this will irritate anyone. But we still have 9 standards to go through. So the 9 standards for a special use start with, it is one of the special uses specifically listed in the zoning ordinance. And it is, so that standard has been met. Number 2, it's in keeping with the purposes and policies of the adopted comprehensive general plan and the zoning ordinance as amended from time to time. The comprehensive general plan is certainly, one of its goals is to promote the growth and redevelopment of spaces, to strengthen our economic base, and certainly to retain and enhance the diversity of businesses, and also obviously to try and keep current Evanston business owners happy and keep them in the neighborhood and developing more properties. So I think that standard has certainly been met. Number 3, it will not cause a negative cumulative effect when its effect is considered in conjunction with the cumulative effect of various special uses of all types in the immediate neighborhood and the effect of the proposed type of special use upon the city as a whole. This space used to be a type 1 restaurant. We're just switching to a type 2 restaurant. So all of the associated things that go with a type 1 restaurant, which is traffic and people and deliveries and all of that stuff has already been accounted for in the neighborhood. And so there's already an expectation of that in the neighborhood. So I don't believe that this one will cause any negative cumulative effect. Number 4, it does not interfere with or diminish the value of the property in the neighborhood. An empty storefront does diminish the value of the property. So by filling that storefront, we are certainly increasing the value of the property in the neighborhood and creating a more vibrant downtown with more people who can come and spend their money. So that standard has been met. Number 5, it can be adequately served by public facilities and services. There are new bike lanes on the road, so we can get all sorts of local traffic there. There is public parking nearby. It's also served by Metra and bus service. So we do believe that is adequately served by these services, and that standard has been met. Number 6, it does not cause undue traffic congestion. Again, as this was just a change from a type 1 to a type 2, it's the same amount of traffic that has always been there. In fact, we're actually hoping there's a little more, so it stays in business longer. So I do believe that standard has been met. Number 7, it preserves significant historical and architectural resources. Although the building is a landmark, there are no changes that are being made to the exterior. So I do believe that that standard has been met. Number 8, it preserves significant natural and environmental features. There are none, so that standard does not apply. And 9, it will comply with all other applicable regulations of the district in which it is located and other applicable ordinances. It certainly will by getting all the required licenses and permits required by the city. So we have a motion to City Council, right? A recommendation to City Council. We have hours from, I guess I would be proposing from 10 a.m. Do we want to stop it at 10 p.m. or do we want to let them go as late as that 17 and go to midnight? Do you guys have thoughts?
Yes, I'd recommend that it be midnight. I think that's consistent with the neighborhood.
Okay. So 10 a.m. to midnight, Monday through Sunday, and employees park off-street. Commissary deliveries take place in the rear. Anything else?
Parking.
Yeah, employees park off-street. And then in coordination, the litter collection plan and all the other good stuff.
All right, then. I'll make a motion in the matter of ZBA 18 ZMJV-0021 that we recommend that City Council grant the special use requested, subject to the following conditions. 1, that hours of operation be limited from 10 a.m. till midnight, 7 days a week. 2, that employees be prohibited from utilizing the metered parking on the street and be advised of that. 3,
Deliveries in the rear.
that deliveries take place in the rear using the access from the rear of the building. 4, that the applicant comply with the city's litter collection and litter pickup plans. And 5, that the project otherwise be developed and run in accordance with the documents and testimony submitted.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? With a vote of 5-0, you will go to City Council with a recommendation for approval. Good luck with your project. Moving on to 1503 Church Street. Scott, will you read that one, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, members of the public. The property owner is appealing the zoning administrator's decision to deny a minor zoning variation to construct a 26.5-foot by 29.5-foot detached garage with a proposed building height of 27 feet, where 20 feet is the maximum building height allowed for a detached accessory structure within the R1 single-family district. Staff and the zoning administrator recommend that the zoning board affirms the decision to deny this relief. Staff does not feel that the applicant's proposal has met the standards for relief for a minor variation, and that the requested accessory structure and uses could be contained within a 20-foot tall structure as limited by code. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you tell us a little bit about your project? Your name and address first, please.
Name's Angelo Frigo. Address is 1503 Church.
Great.
Project is to reconstruct a dilapidated garage and get some workspace above it for my wife and I. She's an artist, middle school teacher, and I'm a local designer. I do work for companies locally. We need some workspace outside the house, stay close to the family, and we'd like to build that above the garage, but the 20-foot height doesn't allow us to do that and get enough space for ourselves. We originally applied for 27 feet just to give some flexibility when we do work with an architect, but the new plan, which isn't here, is essentially the same, but it's 24 feet. We can do everything that we want to with a lesser height. The challenge that we have is that the alternative is to push the garage over to connect it to the house. That would allow us to build at 35 feet. We don't want to do that because that would result in more concrete, less green space in our property, and there's a real lack of green space in our neighborhood. An image here that I could share that just shows how little green space there actually is in that area. So we want to minimize that.
Can you explain why you are not able to do the project within the allowed height of 20 feet. When you looked at this, and you obviously started at 27 feet, you've now brought it down to 24 feet, but why are you not able to accomplish what you need within the as of right 20 feet allowance?
Just the amount of space that we need for our working arrangements for the two of us. The plan that we created that had a 20-foot height limited us to just about 200 square feet above a garage space, and that we just didn't feel like that was enough space for us to work in.
200 square feet, though, is two 10 by 10 rooms, right?
Yes.
Are the bedrooms in your house bigger than 10 by 10?
No, they're smaller.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about is the equivalent space of 2 bedrooms in your house.
I like a large bedroom, yeah.
And larger than that. And so you're thinking that that's not adequate an amount of space for you?
That's right. Yep. Just with the materials that my wife works with and the occasional meeting that I would have with colleagues, it's just we wouldn't build it without we would move the garage over towards the house and allow us to have more space.
Help me understand the alternative proposal where you're saying you would move the garage closer to the house and what that would allow you to do. I didn't understand that from the way you presented it.
An attached garage has a maximum height of 35 feet, whereas a detached garage has a maximum height of 20 feet.
And has staff considered whether that would be an allowable use given the site there? Is that something that staff has considered, or this is just something that is being presented this evening?
I don't believe we've been presented that plan and have not created a zoning analysis for it. As part of the principal structure, it would need to comply with the setbacks for principal structure. So, for example, the 30-foot rear yard setback, in addition to the 15-foot street side yard setback.
You mentioned your wife is a middle school teacher.
Yes,
And what's your day job or your profession?
I'm a designer.
And so where do you work now?
I have clients, McDonald's and Allstate are my main clients, the World Bank, Discover.
You work
local-
on site at your clients?
No, I work from home, and then I occasionally go to their offices.
Where do you, and how long have you worked at home?
About 4 years,
And what space do you use now for your work when you're home?
my kitchen table.
I can commiserate with you. Do the same.
And how many square feet do you have in your house now?
It's a little under 1,000 square feet,
And how big is your family?
4 people.
So, sir, you're talking about building this garage in the space where your current garage is. I believe it's 1 story now,
That's correct.
and so you're talking about extending it to 2 stories.
It's also a bigger garage,
It's a much bigger garage.
It's
based
bigger.
on the site plan,
Yeah.
right? You're talking about making it 30 feet wide by 26 and a half deep,
That's right. It's
which is
about-
bigger than it currently is at
1.5 times
22
larger,
feet
yeah.
by 20 feet. So it's a much larger garage.
Are there any other garages in your neighborhood that are taller than 20 feet? Detached garages?
Not within 2 blocks of us, but there are a bunch a little bit further, about 2 blocks, about 4 blocks north and east. They're all much larger houses, so I think there are a lot of large houses that have garages that are larger than what I'm asking for, but none with the size of the house, the primary structure that I have.
Actually, I live within a block of your space, and my garage is taller. It's a double-story garage, but my house is taller than yours. But I'm going to ask you, there is a structure right next to your garage. It seems like it's taller. It's not on this plan, but when you pass by.
I have the neighbor's house immediately north of mine.
Yeah.
They did a pretty large
I meant immediately south of the garage.
south.
Is it like a playhouse or something? It's taller than the garage.
Immediately east of the garage.
Yeah,
the,
east of the
playhouse
garage.
has been there for.
Oh, it's tall. Yeah,
It was
it's
there when we
taller.
moved in. Yep.
Okay.
But that would be taken down with the old garage. Sadly.
Staff, can you go through with me a little bit about how you tried to work with the applicant on this proposal?
I know that the project planner for this did mention what could be done within a garage. I believe he also described that with dormers you can get
Right.
additional floor space within the second story. I know the footprint of the garage is proposed is about 780 square feet. Don't know exactly with the dormers going out what type of square footage that would allow. Would cut that down, to some degree, but would likely be able to get most of that square footage there on the second floor as well.
So it seems as though have you been worked with an architect yet to sort of
Not for this project, not yet. No, just waiting to see if
think about it spatially?
Yeah.
Because I think that an architect is going to be able to help you realize the space you need within the requirements of the zoning code. There is if you're familiar, I don't know how familiar you are with all of Evanston, but there is a development on the northeast side, right, Kendall College, where they have two-story garages. Every single unit, every single new house has a two-story garage. And those are large enough to house living and bedrooms and bathrooms and kitchens and the whole shebang. And so I think, and they all meet zoning code. So I think within the 20-foot zoning height, along with some dormers, I think that you can get what you need, given what you're looking for. Because the pitched roof, right, it really only needs to start at 5 feet in order for it to still be usable space, right, because you can walk there. So we're not limiting the overall width to 16 feet per your diagram, right? It can be bigger. Sorry, on the blue one we have. That one, up in the upper left corner, right?
Yep.
But even 16 feet by 30 feet is a big space.
Right.
That's a lot of space. So it seems to me that there's a lot of opportunity here for you to be able to get the amount of space you need within the zoning code. And I think that an architect can help you get there. Are there other questions for the applicant? No? Okay. All right. Is there anything else you'd like to say about your project?
No.
Great. If you might mind having a seat, is there anybody here to talk about this project, to comment on this project? Nope. Okay. With that, we will close the record and deliberate. I think the interesting thing here is that we only have the 5 standards for the minor appeal that are the standards to deliberate against, which is that the difficulty is not self-created, the variation will not have a substantial adverse impact, it is in keeping with the comprehensive general plan, that it's consistent with preservation policies, and it's the least deviation necessary. So, thoughts on this project relative to those 5 standards?
Only that, as someone who works from home, I sympathize with the applicant in the desire to have additional or separate space. However, the applicant has successfully been working from that space for 4 years. And with respect to the decision-making of the zoning administrator and zoning staff, I can't say that they misapplied the standards here. And in fact, I don't think the standards for reversing that decision and or granting the appeal are met.
Mary Beth, can you, you had some reasoning that I'd like to understand a little bit more from an architecture viewpoint,
Yeah.
because I, like Scott, support the project in theory that there's a growing family in a smaller home that is comfortable in in their existing home and want to stay there, want to continue to grow. And that is something that I think we as a body support. But I want to understand a little bit more what you're thinking as it relates to how they could get what they need in that space within the existing zoning. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So, as I understand it, second floor dormers are allowed on second floors, and there is no limitation to them. So, for example, on a third floor or a 2.5 story, those dormers are limited to a certain percentage of the width of the front of the house and of the length of the house. So there are limitations when you're talking about that 2.5 story. When you're on a second story, you don't have those same limitations. So there is a lot of flexibility here to get space in the other direction that will give them more floor area, some more usable floor area. And I think with some a good architect can help them achieve what they need to achieve within the zoning requirements.
So I have a question for you, Mary Beth, for
Yeah.
clarity. So
Yeah.
he's coming to us in lieu of or prior to going to see an architect to try to solve these problems?
I can't answer that. All I can answer is what I heard him say, what I heard the applicant say, which was that he has not yet spoken to an architect. He was trying to figure out what he could, the maximum bubble he could build within, and then go to an architect.
Oh, okay.
So I
So
think
we're
we-
just doing parameters and then the plan will come.
Yeah, I think we may be out of order.
Yeah, maybe a little bit.
Sorry, I just wanted to add one other thought that I had, which I meant to say, which is that this application also gives me concern from a precedential standpoint that I don't think we want to create a precedent where all of Evanston comes in seeking to build a garage higher than 20 feet just because they can make more office space or more livable or usable space in it that way.
Tamarna, you're the only one we haven't heard from.
I mean, I agree. I mean, if he can find something that'll keep him under the, or at the 20 feet,
Okay.
I think that'll be,
Okay. We are all certainly empathetic to your cause, and we many of us work from home, and so we want you to be able to continue to work from home, be close to the family, and stay in your house without having to move. It's just we all see that there is an opportunity here for you to get everything that you're looking for within the zoning code. So I think with that respect, then we will end up voting. But Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, do we just need to vote now whether do I have to go through the standards, or do we just get to vote whether we agree with the application, your application of the standards?
The ultimate motion is to affirm the decision,
Right.
if that's what you're seeking. The standards that would apply to this are the A through E, the minor variation standards.
Do I have to go through those? Are you asking me to?
It would probably be best to
All right, you're
consider those
asking me to.
standards.
All right, so we have 5 variant standards for a minor appeal. The first is that the practical difficulty is not self-created. In this particular case, I don't believe that standard has been met because I do think that the difficulty is self-created. I think that there is a desire to have perhaps a certain look to the garage, and I think with some other architectural approach to it, a different architectural approach to it, they can achieve the needs and solve the needs and the problems that they have, and what they're trying to achieve here. So I do not believe that standard has been met. Letter B, the requested variation will not have a substantial adverse impact on the use, enjoyment, or property values of adjacent properties. I do think that when you have a 20-plus foot wall in the back corner of the lot that is so close to the lot line, because it only needs to be 3 feet from the lot line, it will be essentially a wall on the property line. And right now, we limit fences to 6 feet, so we don't end up with those giant walls right on the property line. And so I think that this large structure will, in fact, prohibit light to that northern neighbor. I think that the large 2-story wall is going to be imposing on that elevation. So I do believe that there will be an adverse impact. So I don't believe that standard has been met. C, the requested variation is in keeping with the comprehensive general plan and zoning ordinance. That standard certainly has been met because the goal is to keep homeowners in their homes and to allow them to modify their house as needs arise for their particular families. So I do believe that standard has been met. D, the requested variation is consistent with the preservation policies set forth in the comprehensive general plan. I'm not sure that that's applicable since I don't think we're in a historic district here. Are we?
Nope.
Okay, since we're not in a historic district, so that standard hasn't been met, or doesn't need to be met. And E, the requested variation requires the least deviation from the applicable regulation among the feasible options identified before the zoning administrator. I think that we, as a board, have identified a couple of options, certainly some dormers that would give them the additional space they need while keeping the maximum height to 20 feet. So I don't believe that this is the least variation necessary, the least deviation from the applicable regulation. So I don't believe that that standard has been met. So can I have
I move in the matter ZBA 18ZMJV-0016 that we affirm the decision of the zoning administrator and thereby deny the appeal.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? And unfortunately, with a vote of 5-0, your appeal is not upheld. All right, so moving
Mary
on.
Beth, can I just add that, just from my perspective, well, of course, I agree with the decision. I do hope that you'll take the opportunity to meet with an architect, because certainly your project has merit, and I hope that you have a successful project moving forward.
I think we can all agree with that. Moving on to the next case, which is 3233, 3249 Central Street. Melissa, tell us about this one.
Highlands on Central LLC, property owner, applies for major zoning relief to construct a 12-unit multiple-family residence with a detached garage and open parking in the R4 General Residential District and the OCSC Central Street Overlay District. The applicant requests 12 dwelling units where a maximum of 10 dwelling units are allowed, zoning code section 6854C, and 46.5% building lot coverage where a maximum 40% is allowed, zoning code section 6856. The Zoning Board of Appeals is the determining body for this case. Documents included as part of the record include a packet that was passed out at the beginning of the meeting of additional letters of support and opposition since the ZBA packet posted, as well as variation application submitted March 13th, 2018, public benefits summary, zoning analysis, renderings, site plan, landscape plan, floor plans, elevations, plat of survey, letters of support and objection, as of right site plan and bulk rendering, image of property, aerial view of property, zoning map of property, and Dapper meeting minutes excerpt of April 4th, 2018.
Sorry, Melissa, I'm just looking at this. I see duplicate pages. Did I just get duplicate pages? I hope not. Okay. I see the same names on two sheets.
There's some overlap.
Okay. I just want to make sure there wasn't something I was missing.
There may be some overlap. Lots of emails came in the last 2 or 3 hours of today.
There are duplicate pages also.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, we're trying to catch up.
No worries.
Give us a second.
But this is qualitative and not quantitative, so
Yeah.
I don't know that it matters that the same signatures appeared twice.
Yeah. I just was checking to make sure. Okay. And you're going to need the sign-in sheet, right, so I can help you. Thank you. Okay.
Do we have the
The clicker.
clicker? I thought this was it, but I think this is something else altogether.
It's not that.
Just try it.
Right underneath.
There it is. It's too much paperwork. I'm just going to do a test click. Perfect.
All right. Start with
Hello.
your name and your business address, please. Thank you.
I am Eileen Shobe. I work with OKW Architects at 600 West Jackson Boulevard, Chicago, Illinois. And I'm representing the owners of the property who we have here today, Dan and Bill Skemmerhorn, who are in partnership with their Skemmerhorn and Evanston Building and Mortgage to create Highlands on Central.
Thank you.
We were in front of you in February to discuss the same property as a 14-unit option. We heard all of your comments as well as the neighbors' comments, and we sat back to our drawing boards and relooked at some of the schemes we originally created, which was a 10-unit as of right, and tried to blend some of the comments that we heard specifically from the residents, who are the people who are most impactful in the decision, and created a 9-unit as of right townhome, as well as a 12-unit that you see before you. So just to get you back up to speed on the property location, we are on Central Avenue near Bent Park, very close to the Crawford intersection. We are bounded by single-family homes on either side and the R4 district, and we're straight right in this section right here. Just to give you an idea of the neighboring property, most of the area around this space is 2-story primarily, single-family homes with smaller single-family 1-story plus townhomes and row homes. Our project site is located right in this zone. As you can see, there's quite a lot of trees, 1-story and 2-story buildings, and the park across the way. So to bring me back to where we had started from, this is the 14-unit plan we came in front of you before in February. We had approximately 9-foot side yard setbacks, and we were asking for 3 variations: the unit count, the impervious surface count, and the lot coverage. Some of the schemes that we also reviewed was a 10-story as of right, a 10-unit as of right property. Looking at it a little closer, we realized the better fit would be a 9-unit as of right property, which you kind of see in this scene right here. What we've done is the orange overlay is where that 9-unit would sit, with the parking tucked underneath in a 9-row home with 3 floors of living, 2.5 stories tall. We would max out the 35-foot height requirement within the zoning, but we would comply with all of the setbacks, permeable surface, lot coverage, et cetera, due to the garages being tucked in underneath. That would require 3 floors of living as opposed to our original proposal where the main unit is 1 level. We next looked at a smaller unit footprint to address the residents' concern of the building feeling a little too large, meaning too close to their property, as well as a larger footprint on the street. We also cut down the required amount of parking when we did this. We are still requiring a unit upgrade of 12 from 10, and our lot coverage is just over due to having the parking as a separate element as opposed to having it tucked in and underneath the building so that we can create the single level living. So to get into the details a little further, this footprint shows kind of all of those 3 schemes on top of each other. And as you can see, the 12 unit that we're proposing actually has about the same street coverage that the original townhomes do. And in terms of the parking, it basically fills in the amount of street parking that they had before, but with mostly covered parking. So the impact to the neighbors to the side is less. The other thing that we felt with this unit versus the 9-unit as of right, that would be a 3+ bedroom, which is looking at a family, 3 floors of living space with 3+ bedrooms. So the density of use is higher with the 9-unit. You would have 27 to 36 bedrooms. Potential occupants could be 2, but most likely will be 4 to 5 occupants in that space. Also, it tends to be a family in the middle section of their living where you have a lot more children who are much busier, lots of attic, lots of access in the alley, cars, etc. Whereas the 12-unit plan is a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, which has a bedroom density of 24. Most of the folks who are going to move into a 12-unit and a 2-bedroom are going to be kind of starter families or older empty nesters or someone with a caregiver. So the density of use, even though we have more density of units, is less in a 12-unit we're proposing versus the 9-unit as of right. It also has a less impact regarding the neighbors. We're well beyond, we have a 25-foot setback, where zoning allows for a 5-foot setback. And as you can see in our as of right, we would be maxing that out to create the capacity to get the 9 units. Also, the unit footprints are larger in a 9-unit. You're talking about a 2,700 square foot unit, whereas the 2 bedrooms we're proposing are 1,200 square foot. again, because it's single-floor living as opposed to multiple levels.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Sorry. So from what I remember from the prior application 2 months ago, one of the issues we were hung up on was the zoning standard that the desire for zoning relief was motivated primarily by a desire to extract additional income from the property without a significant enough correlative public benefit. So can you please describe how this application addresses that concern?
Yes, I have some slides at the end of the program, but I'm happy to jump into them right now. We looked at basically a 9-unit as of right. The rental price for that is much higher than a 2-bedroom. So we use the MLS to look at the properties that are available now and that are rented now to compare the average rental for a 3-bedroom plus versus a 2-bedroom that we propose. And if I click through here very quickly, right here we have a chart that kind of explains the averages that we required on the MLS website, as well as backing that up with the numerous apartment websites that are available now, like Zillow, who give you the average rent and the median rent for a 2-bedroom unit versus a 3-bedroom unit. And when you compare the 9-unit as of right versus the 12-unit that we're proposing for 2 bedrooms, the actual income is higher for a 9-unit as of right than it is for a 12 2-bedroom, basically because the unit sizes are smaller. It's a more affordable rental footprint than it is on a 9-unit.
Can I ask a question about that? Don't you really think that you would be more in the high rent range on the 2 bedrooms since it'll all be new?
A lot of these properties that we're looking at are actually for new properties. A fair amount of them are even quite larger or in the high-rise situation, so they have more amenities. So the 2,500 is what we are looking at for an actual lease, where the average is 2,600 at the median. So the calculation here is for 2,500 per unit.
How about on the benefit side? What are you guys doing in the public
And then on the
benefit
benefit side versus the 9-unit. So the 9-unit as of right, there is no request for public benefits. And since we're 9 units, we will not be providing money into the inclusionary housing fund as well. With the 12-unit, the public benefits that we would be doing are what we first proposed plus some added benefits. We would be providing demolition through Evanston Workforce. And besides using them to do our demolition, we are hiring one of their trainees for a 24-month period during the beginning, middle, and end and occupation of construction. We will be providing flashing site signs at the crosswalk per request of the City of Public Works. Where the children cross, right now they have a flag system, so now it would be a flashing light system to allow people to understand there's a crosswalk.
That was part of the prior proposal, correct?
Correct.
And so was the Evanston Works demolition.
So was the Evanston Works, so was the demolition, and so was the bus stop that we would be providing here. And after review with the city, this is the end of the line for the bus. So there was a request originally for a bus stop, and when we met with them again and in Dapper, they realized there's a bus stop across the way that's for people going into the city. That is more used. Usually anyone in this location is getting dropped off. And so the shelter itself, we would not be doing, but the pad we would, because for people with limited mobility, a pad would be a good idea, because right now there's just grass. So there's really no great way to get dropped off. And then the added public benefit is regarding the alley. This is something the ownership originally wanted to try to tackle, but meeting with the city, since they're so far behind on their alley pavement requirement, kind of playing into that fund, it didn't seem to be the right idea. So we worked with the contractor, and they met with the city, and the intent is to provide new stone for that alley. The first part of it will be that during construction, access will only be from this end of the alley, which is the higher section of the alley and the alley with the least amount of damage. Near the end where this drains down, this part of the alley is in pretty bad shape right now. So the concept would be is all construction traffic would enter here, and any damage caused by construction during that time period would be cleaned up, re-graveled, re-stoned, and then providing about 10 yards of stone to be distributed during the alley. It could be distributed during 3 partitions while the city does this. I think it's 3 times a year. They go through and regrade and restone. So we would provide that stone, kind of beginning, middle, and end of the project, to regrade and fill all the divots and digits to leave the alley when it's completed in better shape than when it was started. So that's a new section that we had added from our previous proposal.
So to clarify, to Scott's point, then the net change in terms of public benefits from on what's proposed tonight for the 12 units versus what was proposed with the 14 units is the alley.
Correct. Adding
Treatment.
the alley treatment.
Can I ask a question since we're on benefits? The affordable housing. So if you guys would provide an on-site affordable housing unit, then your variance for dwelling units really just changes to 1 versus 2.
Correct.
So, and we all know that throughout your documentation, right, you're trying to be inclusive.
Correct.
There's nothing more inclusive than affordable housing.
Correct.
So why aren't you taking that opportunity to stand up and be that great
that
great developer who doesn't take the fee in lieu and says, "Yep, I'm going to provide affordable housing here"?
I think the best person to answer this is the developer themselves.
I'm Dan Skirmahorn,
Yeah.
and I would argue that we are providing affordable housing, inclusionary housing. We are including a segment other than economically who are not being served currently, and that terms of mobility
Right.
issues. Now, with regard to
Yeah.
the economics of affordable on-site housing,
Yeah.
we couldn't do it at 14. We certainly can't do it at 12, especially when we add the additional benefit of the alley gravel work. And there's only so much we can give. Unfortunately, there are things that are associated with this project that no one really sees. For example, we've got to go into the street 7 times to clean up old water and sewer taps that were not put there by us, but since we're doing this property, we have to clean them all up, which means repaving the street,
Yep.
digging into the basement, into the underground, and cleaning all those and disconnect them. We're only going to come out with 2. We've got to take out 7. We've got underground water retention that is massive. We're talking a 50-inch diameter pipe across the entire length of the property, then wrapping the corner. There's only 12 units to spread these fixed costs over. And at some point, you just can't do it. We have already met with our bank to take on the permanent financing and show them our pro forma at $2,500 a month rent because the tenants are paying their own utilities. And so that is a hard number, that rent. To take out a unit and drop that rent and the simple...
But we're dropping it, right, by 20 or 40%?
That's what I thought, too. So when you say 60% is
Yeah.
the word AMI,
Yeah,
your thought was you take 2,500 times 60%.
right.
That's not correct. That's what I thought it was, too. I'm so glad that we met with Sarah Flax because the rent is not that way. The rent is determined based on what a person who is at 60% AMI can afford according to the, I think it's HUD's guidelines,
Okay.
which would be about $800 a month.
Which is like 30% of their income or something like that, right?
Right, but of the rent of $2,500,
Right.
it's 70%, 65%. So I thought what you thought, and that's why we thought maybe we could do it. But when you look at it from that standpoint, you're talking about $500,000 over the life of the project, reduction in
Sorry,
rental income.
quick question.
The life
then.
of the project's 25 years, right?
Right.
Because the
I'm sorry, the length of
affordable
yeah, that's what I meant to say,
component
not
is
the
limited
project,
to
but
25
yeah,
years.
Yes, I meant to say.
Quick question then, sorry. If the rent is based off of $800 as a factor of their affordable income, can't you make up for the loss in the rent by increasing the other 11 units by $100 a month
No.
or thereabout?
No. I can't.
I think at the market.
I mean, the market tells us what the rent is.
Well, the market you just showed us is a range that goes up to $3,800.
When people have amenities like the workout rooms, the party rooms, you go down to the building on Chicago Avenue, the Amley building, the amenities that they have when they're offering those kinds of rents. 1620
Is that where the
Central.
MLS comparables are from?
Yes, because that's what's comparable in Evanston that's new construction. I can't compare this to my vintage rental buildings that I manage where a 2-bedroom rent's for $1,300. It's not apples to apples. What I'm kind of compared to is what's out there in the marketplace that I can try to compete with. And I can compete with the new elevator building where the Evanston Theaters used to be. and the amenities that they have. I don't have those amenities to offer and to be able to charge those kinds of rents. So believe me, this is the one thing we do know, and that's the market. I mean, we've been in this business for 50 years in Evanston. So,
In some of the conversation, though, we've been having, you're telling us that you've been saying that there is such demand for this product.
yes,
Right?
yes.
Supply, demand.
You're right. And
Let's
you know
do the
what? Here's the
crisscross,
thing.
and where do they crisscross?
We are not going to do this and fail.
Right.
You don't want that?
We don't want you
We
to
don't want
fail.
that.
No.
We have to be realistic in our assumptions.
Yeah.
We have to go forward assuming the assumptions that we've made are based on our investigation of the market, the cost to build, et cetera, et cetera. We have been at this for 2 years.
Yeah.
We've run these calculations over and over and over and over.
Right. So we haven't been doing it for 2 years, and we're trying to catch up, and we're
Right.
trying to catch up pretty quick.
Right.
But it seems that if you're telling us that there is such demand for this product, that you would be more than the median rent.
I hope we are, but I'm not going to do my numbers based on that. I'm not going to get up there and fail.
Actually, the median rent is $2,600.
Right.
So we're asking for, I calculated it based on $2,500.
Right, right.
So you're doing
So
below
we're
the
under
median.
Slightly under the median, just based on new construction that we were comparing to, because we can only compare to what has recently been built. So the median is $2,600. There's about.
Even if it is
3 or
2,600,
4
that $100 isn't going to make a difference. There are certain limitations to what we can do based on what we have to work with. And if I was able to build a 15-story building and I could spread out these fixed costs, it would be a much different story. But we don't have that opportunity.
But we know that. If
We
you,
have
if you
cut
provide the
down-
affordable housing right, you get to cut out 3 garage spaces. Right.
I don't want to cut out 3 garage spaces.
You may not want to, but
I
there is
wanna
a cost
do-
associated
So
with
when
those,
we came
right?
here before.
So how does that cost not offset?
When we came here before,
Some of this
we
other
were taken
stuff.
away with 2 things. One was your comment of, why are you guys even here? Why don't you just go build your by right,
Right.
and why are you wasting your time?
Right.
And believe me, that thought has been in our head for the last 2 months. But the other comment was, you had the opportunity to listen to your neighbors again, and they've made some good points, and it seemed like there's an ability to compromise. And we listened to that very strongly as well. We revised our plans. We met with the neighbors. We had a meeting at Lovelace Park. We had about 24 neighbors there. We showed them what the opportunity is for us to build by right, and we showed them what we'd like to build in terms of increased side yard setbacks to 25 feet, a smaller footprint, a smaller density of bedrooms, a smaller density of height, width, depth, everything. The problem is, and it seems odd, that the zoning ordinance says go build 9 units because it's under this number of 10, but you're going to have more bedrooms, more square footage, more density of use, but yet to build what we'd like to build, what the neighbors like, happens to require a variance. There seems to me to be something in the zoning ordinance that's out of whack if that's what it requires. Maybe we should be saying the number of bedrooms as the measure instead of the number of units. I don't know the answer to the question. All I know is we're trying to do what the neighbors would like. We're trying to build a product that we feel has been underserved in the marketplace, and we are trying to give public benefits. You know, we talked about Evanston rebuilding warehouse to demolish. Actually, it's deconstruct and recycle, et cetera. But to me, the bigger part of that is the workforce training person who now gets the opportunity to come out and spend a year and a half or whatever it is, 2 years on a job site learning construction in a real-world example, and then take that, what they've learned, and go out and get a job in the real world. What better benefit of that is there than that? The neighbors have said to us, we don't care about the bus stop. We don't care about the flashing lights. We do. I have kids who used to play soccer at Ben Park, and I know what it was like to go across that street. I want to have that benefit there and be able to say that we did that for the neighborhood. We also want to be able to look our neighbors in the eye and say, we listened to what you had to say, and we tried our darndest to give you what you wanted. But unfortunately, at some point, you can't give any more, and you go back to the question of why you're here. Why don't you just go build what you can build by right? Now we've got neighbors who aren't going to be very happy with us or anybody. That's not our intention. We've been in town for 50 years. We want to be here for another 50 years. My kids are graduating from college. They may want to come into this business. I want them to be able to walk up and down this street holding their head high and say, we listened and we did our part to be a part of the neighborhood. We are doing everything we can, I promise you, to make this happen at 12 units. After that, if it doesn't work, we're not coming back. I mean, there's just no more way to cut this thing back anymore. This is as far as we can possibly go and still do what everybody seems to want. So I am happy to pay into the fund, the $75,000. I think it's a great cause, and I'm happy to do it. But if it doesn't work out and you guys don't agree, I understand. But this is as far as we can come.
Okay. Can I ask you a couple other questions while,
Sure.
while I got you standing?
Sure.
How many other properties on Central Street do you own like this?
None.
This is the only one? So the other building, so the other sort of one-story townhouses,
We don't have any of those.
those
We've
are
been
owned
approached.
by, those are owned by somebody else.
Right, we've been approached by individual owners of those towns, so we buy our units out. The one
Okay.
that's, so there's a single-family house
Yep.
just east of us, and there's a group of, I think, 9 more.
Yep.
They came to us about a year and a half ago and said, would you do this to ours? And I said, let's see how this one goes first.
So you understand that's part of our concern, right? Is that we're potentially setting precedent for the rest of the street.
And that's why I think the variance is the way to go.
It makes us nervous.
Because the idea is that if I can build this 2.5-story, 5-foot
Right.
setbacks by right versus the smaller footprint, then you're right. The precedent we want to set is let them build a little bit smaller, more in keeping with the neighborhood, than putting a behemoth next to a single story on one side and little town, single-story townhouse on the other.
But
It's
but you also know that across the street, right, and a little bit further east, right, there are those 5 townhouses
Yep.
in a row.
Yep. They got
They
no
do not
green
feel-
space at all.
They do not feel out of place with the neighborhood. They do not feel as though.
Couldn't build those today. There's not one bit of green space on them.
Right.
They're concrete everywhere.
In the back?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? You guys, I mean, I go by there. Believe me, we looked at those when we
Okay.
first started doing this.
I have another question for you, because
Sure.
one of the benefits I see is, again, this concept of inclusionary housing, right? And the idea of trying to make these units adaptable. For me, there's a massive difference between adaptable and accessible.
Okay.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but when a tenant comes into an adaptable unit, they have to pay for any of the modifications.
Maybe the ordinance says that they do, but that's not what we would do.
I can
Go ahead.
answer that question.
Thank you.
So, fair housing,
Yeah.
which is the only guideline that we would have to follow, just requires you to have clearances already there.
Right.
It is not part of Illinois accessibility, which is a different requirement. Since we do not have the amount of units, we only need to comply with fair housing. So it's like 2'10" doors and a few clearances. So what we're proposing to do is the large, adaptable, accessible spaces. All of the doors are larger, all of the bathrooms have the full swing.
Right.
The only thing that someone would have to do, showers with no thresholds. The only thing that usually occurs after the fact is someone may want to counter lower or higher, and that really depends on the person's needs.
Right.
So you put in the plumbing for the correct height, and you have the clearances. A lot of our clearances are ready for side approach, which is actually what a lot of folks prefer as opposed to the lower, because there's different people in the house
Right.
that have both.
So you've got light switches at the lower levels.
Correct.
And outlets
Everything
at
is
the higher
at the
levels.
lower level.
You're saying all of that's set already.
Correct.
And the only modification is cabinetry?
The only modification would be to lower, and we have it built into the plan, you could
Right.
lower your countertop
Right.
to a lower height
Right.
and have knee space underneath.
Right.
Plumbing is installed so that all you're modifying is the cabinet itself.
And that modification is not paid for by the tenant?
If we have a tenant who wants us to do that.
Sorry, I need you to come over.
Correct. It's not required by code, but I'm sure that
No,
they'd
I
be
understand
willing
it's
to
not
work with it.
required by code. What I'm trying to figure out is the practical application here.
Yes, we would encourage that, we would welcome that, absolutely.
Is there a reason, then, that you're not providing that right from the get-go?
I think for the reason that Eileen was saying is that because you don't know what height they want. The side
Right.
approach doesn't require you to reduce the height of the countertop, and so we would be guessing, basically.
I can kind of speak on that. One of the things is that the accessibility height, it's a variation.
Sure.
So it really depends on the person and their disabilities. How tall are they and how short they are and what their disability is. Some people have problems with disabilities of over. So sometimes seniors actually need a taller cabinet as opposed to the lower that you might build in because of the issues of back support. So the best thing to do is to streamline those very simple modifications with the person who's taking the space. When we've done a lot of student housing or other folks where we're required by law for someone to come in and make modifications, usually the modifications they make is more grab bars that they want to install. Rarely does someone change the countertop or how they're working, because that's how they work right now. But it's a very simple process in terms of cabinets, because you have the flooring underneath, you have the plumbing ready to go. So it's a very simple modification. And in this case, we're building the full showers in the master suite. If you look, it's quite large. You have the full turning radius, you have the full ability to get in the shower, out of the shower, and have someone help you, which is one of the things that is kind of above and beyond what a full accessible unit would be. We're assuming a lot of these folks might be older and need assistant, as opposed to someone who may be able to do it on their own. So the idea there is that you want to modify it per those person's needs. Someone who's much taller or someone who's much shorter may take different variations. And we've seen it, I've seen it in the industry. I've done a lot of student housing where we get folks who take the first floor unit and their modifications are very minor. What they really need help with is the maneuvering clearance around doors and into spaces and their showers, which are already kind of an at-grade level. I do a lot of work with senior housing, and a lot of the design implementations we've done here are specifically kind of anyone who has mobility issues can deal with them, but there's slightly interesting combination when you get older. They do tend to like the higher vanities, which is interesting. Also, the higher toilets than the lower.
Except that a lot of the. So one of the primary benefits, right, again, is this idea of inclusionary and for handicapped accessible, which to me specifically is wheelchairs and those sorts of things, right?
Correct.
Because not every unit in any high rise has the lower cabinets and the countertops and all that sort of stuff. So if you just make it adaptable, according to fair housing, you have to give that unit away to anybody, right? Anybody who wants to rent it, you have to rent it to them.
Correct.
If you make it handicapped accessible from the get-go, the likelihood that an able-bodied person wants that unit is much lower. And so you're going to keep that unit available to somebody in the community who's handicapped, who has handicapped needs.
Well, we're doing more than the fair housing. We're meeting all of the accessible, except the counter heights are movable.
But I'm
to
suggesting
what's
that this is one of those
necessary.
great benefits that you're providing to the community.
Correct.
Is that you're providing accessible housing.
Correct.
So provide the accessible housing.
We are.
Not adaptable,
It is,
accessible.
per our drawings and our plans, those meet accessible requirements.
With the correct countertop heights.
The countertop heights, when you read the code, are an option for the tenant, just like you can install your grab bar between 33 and 38. It is a personal preference on where you want to put it based on the person. So you design the cabinetry to be easily swapped out for a lower section where there's no plumbing, the flooring is underneath. So it's
Right,
a
but I'm suggesting
removable.
put in some with the lower plumbing, with the lower countertops, so that they are not as desirable to an able-bodied person, and you have a better chance of getting a handicapped person in there, right? Because we know that somebody who is able-bodied doesn't want that counter lower.
I would say that that's not necessarily true. I know and have lived with someone who is in a wheelchair. Depending if you have a motorized, you're much higher. So sometimes the side approach with a higher counter is better than the 30-inch.
So how do we,
So everything in, it's a little matter of semantics. Everything is designed, all the door clearances, door swings,
No, I
showers,
totally get
thresholds.
that.
The cabinets that can be lowered are designed so that the modification is minimal, because the cabinets have a removable component that takes very little time to switch out if there's a new tenant versus another tenant. So that person can have exactly what they need for very, very little modification
Right.
to the unit. And then the next person who comes in.
do you hear what I'm saying, which is that if one of the benefits is to be inclusionary, right? One of the public benefits is to
Right.
be inclusionary, which is to provide housing for handicapped people who are in wheelchairs, people who have difficulty walking, those sorts of things,
Yes.
who have special needs.
Correct.
How do we keep those units available to those people, given that you have to provide all units to everybody with fair housing?
I don't think I can exclude those units even if they are.
You can't, but it's less likely that an able-bodied person will take a unit. Think about it when you go into a hotel room, right?
Right.
Very few people want the handicapped accessible room. I like it.
I like it.
It's more space. You and I are weird. Most people don't want it, right? And so that's how we keep those units available for the people who need them.
I suppose what you potentially could do is build a few of the units with the lower counters for someone, but if someone comes in and asks for them to be changed, that's what you're going to do for that person who comes in, because everyone's needs are different.
So whether you build it one way and switch it to the other, or build the other way and switch it to the former,
back.
what's the difference?
Because they're going to have the full, the
The difference is that I've potentially left that unit for a handicapped person, and an able-bodied person has taken another unit or has taken the second floor unit.
Well, I mean, I guess until we get to our last unit on the first floor,
Right.
they've got that capability.
My guess is those first floor units are going to go like hotcakes.
Actually, I think the second floors will, but that's a matter of
I'm interested.
preference.
I'm curious about that. We should talk about that sometime.
I think that might be some of the folks who are older and know that they might need help, but want the privacy of the second floor and know that if they need it, they have one floor living. It's one of those you don't realize. You don't want to be reminded that you're old or reminded that you're handicapped. We find that all the time in senior housing. We do not install the grab bars until they ask, because they feel that this is a reminder that they need them. So it's this
That's what I was gonna say about
combination of what is a personal preference.
And the same is probably true with the first floor. There are probably people that move in there without needing some of those things when they move in, but as time goes on and their needs change, we may have to make adaptations for that person who's currently a resident. So we want to offer this to as many people as we can and accommodate what we can do for them as the needs arise.
And just to clarify, the big issue with handicap accessibility is the showers. So these showers will be built with no threshold as they come in,
Right.
which is very difficult and has the full clearance all the way around to get in. That's a very hard thing to build. That master bathroom, as you saw, is you could dance in there. It's specifically designed for that type of use. That's the hardest thing to find when you're looking for it. You could comply with the fair housing guidelines for adaptability and not have to have the shower or the threshold. So it's a harder thing to modify. I think that's the biggest benefit, is all the clearances are built in. The very minor thing of counters is it's all designed with the plumbing so that you can lower or raise it without having to re-plumb or re-floor.
So I'm Bill Skirmahorn, and I'm the construction side of this whole thing, and I've done this before. And from what, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but what we are doing is we're building in the expensive stuff up front. The most expensive thing to a handicap accessible, in my opinion, is the front door. The front step threshold is zero threshold. That's hard to do in an existing unit. We're doing that up front. And I'm glad you're asking. The layouts, and we can go to that slide, the layout has the clearances for all the swings for the wheelchair and all that are built in.
Yeah.
The backing is what we're talking about. We're putting backing in everywhere, and we're going to have it so we can put the grab bars at different height. If we have someone that comes in and says that they want to put a grab bar in, we'll know we're going to have the backing. That's expensive to do in any other place. We're going to do it up front, okay? So I think that we are meeting both, whether you call it adaptable, accessible, we're meeting both of those.
But
We
you're
are meeting
specifically-
both of those, and we can put
specifically
those
calling
in
them
no matter
accessible.
which way we want to do it. Because the easiest thing to do is to lower a countertop. That's easy to do. If we decide that we're going to do, out of those 6 units on the first floor, that we're going to do half of them with it lower, we can certainly do that, because we know that someone could come in and say, raise it. They could go on the other one and say, lower it. So I think this is really just, semantics here. We are doing the hard, difficult thing when we say, well, you're just going to do it for them? Yes, we're going to do it for them, because the hard part is already taken care of. It's very easy to do this. The main thing is, and I'm glad that you're talking about it, because these are very efficient units, and we are going to put this in front of the community. And again, I think that there's a lot of people out there that if they don't need it now, they know they're going to need it in the future. So I think that we are helping out. And if one of your requirements is that we lower a couple of them, I think that that's easy enough to do, because the chances are someone's going to come in and want to raise it. Because you can't pick the timing of when this is going to happen, how these things turn over. You're going to have it on the second floor. I can guarantee you this is going to happen. It's my opinion, but I'm pretty sure that there are people up there that are going to go, it's more convenient. Can you do it? And we would try to accommodate them. Same with all the grab bars. We're going to do all the grab bars up on the second floor because people might need it. So we're going to do the hard stuff up front.
So can I get you to say this? If you believe it to be semantics, can I get you to say that all those units on the first floor will be handicapped accessible, not adaptable? Make them
Aren't they?
handicapped accessible.
They are.
They are handicap accessible.
code. We're gonna do it by code.
Code allows you to put in a varying height between 30 and 36 for countertop. So what you design is you design a work surface that has that ability built in from the beginning. And the same thing with the bathrooms. They have removable base cabinets. The base cabinet's there, and you just slide the piece
Right,
out.
yeah,
and
we
you
talked
have
about
full-
this. So
Correct.
can we stop calling them adaptable then?
They're
And we'll call them
fully-
accessible?
Correct. They're
Then why
fully
were you
accessible.
guys making the distinction if it's semantics?
Because the second floor units aren't accessible because there's stairs.
Okay.
So it's first floor
Okay.
is accessible, and I apologize if my language is incorrect.
That's okay. So the first floor
is
will be fully accessible.
The second floor are adaptable only because you have to get upstairs to get there. Once you're inside, you have the exact same clearances
Right.
that you would have.
I understand.
So if you have temporary disabilities, or you have someone with a caregiver there that you just have to maneuver down the stairs, for someone with limited mobility, not in a full wheelchair. Some folks use wheelchairs, but they can move around when they're in place. They just need the wheelchair for most of their supportive use.
Sure.
So that's the intent there with that process.
Okay. I have dominated for far too long. I apologize.
Can I jump in here?
Hilarious. Hilarious.
And I think just to
Only
kind
12
of
more months to go.
Just to kind of clarify when we were looking at the 9-unit as of right and the 12-unit, what we were doing, we thought it was a really great balance of where the zoning code lets you go and trying to get a variance to interpret. The 9-unit and the 12-unit, from a density standpoint, not units aside, the 12-unit is less dense of use. The effect on the street is less dense. The effect on the neighbors less dense. In many municipalities, the parking is not counted in the lot coverage or how the living units are run. So it actually is a little smaller because you don't have that tucked in. The zoning variance requires to kind of take full use of your property to build vertically and not build horizontally. And I think we were trying to get that balance of where we think housing should be going by having more single-floor living that's in a residential neighborhood, so people can stay and have a neighborhood that is multiple folks, and trying to get that balance and not build out the full, as of right, full amount of income created by the as of right. We thought it was a nice balance between the two, and that's why we tried so hard to work out this type of use with the neighbors.
Are the project costs for this 12-unit proposal different from the project costs from what you proposed for the 14-unit in February?
Yes.
How much lower are they?
Well, I mean, you've got some savings for the fact that you're losing 2 units in a staircase, and there's a slight reduction in the infrastructure on the water retention and the impervious, right?
It's a very small, from a kind of a water management, which is a large of it, we still have the same size tank coming across. We were able to do a few more bioswales that are just not as tucked in and tight, so it gives us a little bit room. But in terms of the infrastructure, it's pretty much the same because we were coming in with one tap to feed all of them as well for water and storm. And our storm water didn't change that much. Our impervious is under our account. Before we were taking advantage of pervious pavers that did not count against our impervious. So in the end, a lot of our infrastructure is exactly the same between a 14 and 12, except for that added, we still have four sides, we still have this end. We basically removed about 20 feet of facade in the front and the back. And then, of course, all the appliances, et cetera, that went in it. So that would definitely go down.
But what's the total cost savings between the projects for you guys?
You know,
You've run the numbers for 2 years. I know you know it.
it's,
I don't know if we've gotten that.
well, the cost to build is about $300,000 a unit, but I don't know that we can say that we cut down $600,000 because things like infrastructure don't go down
Right.
equivalently.
The parking garage is the same. The paving is a
Yeah.
little bit less, but we're not using impervious pavers, which are more expensive. So there's a balance. I don't think it's, you can say it's, 12 over 14 and it's that much of the cost. I think it's probably maybe equivalent to, maybe chopping off one unit because of
I'm just
how
looking
they're
for a
stacked. I don't
dollar
know the
figure.
numbers.
I would
Like the
think
total
it's
budget.
Somewhere in the neighborhood of, probably in the neighborhood of 200 to 250,000.
Okay, thanks.
And then, of course, the equivalent, you've got an income reduction as well. So,
A few questions. First, a question to staff. In our packet, there's a table that is titled Proposed Variations of the Inclusionary Housing Ordinance Development Bonuses and Reduced Variations. And there's one column that says regulation, and then there's another column that's titled as of right proposal. What's the difference between those two?
Hold on, I'm finding it.
And then while Melissa's looking for that, can the applicant describe, can you remind me, on the building lot coverage, was your requested building lot coverage higher with the requested 12 development units, dwelling
Higher
units?
you mean the
than,
14?
Excuse me, the 14, yes.
oh, it's less than the 14.
Yeah, so now at 12, you're requesting 46.5.
Correct.
That's less. What was it as
I
requested with the
believe it
14?
was 55, actually, the calculation is right here on one of these slides, if I can read it. I think it was 50, no, I think it was, lot coverage was 56%.
Okay.
And we were also over on impervious,
Okay.
which we eliminated when we
I
made the unit
understand.
smaller.
Melissa, were you able to find that chart?
No, my computer has a mind of its own suddenly.
Well, I have another question for staff. So the inclusionary housing ordinance kicks in at 10 dwelling units, is that correct?
Correct.
And do we have an example of a development that has been able to successfully include an on-site affordable unit within a development that is of comparable size? I mean, normally, the city, over the last, 12, 14, 16 months have been looking at much larger properties downtown and wrestling with this issue of inclusionary housing. So I'm trying to understand if we have an example of a development of a similar size that has been able to financially incorporate an affordable housing unit on site.
The most comparable that I can think of would be 824 to 828 Noise, which was, I believe, 44 units and did on-site affordable units. I cannot think of any proposal for anywhere from 5 to 15 units since the inclusionary housing ordinance was updated. So not to say that no one has done it, I haven't seen a proposal either way.
I'd say the only one, but it's a very different type of project, was the Howe project on Dempster, where all the units are affordable units. So it's not a market rate providing a percentage.
Didn't we have a 10-unit affordable on Howard not too long ago?
Yeah, they opted not to.
They opted not to?
Yeah.
Okay.
They opted for the the fee in lieu.
Okay.
That's the one in Chicago and Howard. With the green center in the basement.
And, sir, how many units do you own in Evanston?
Do we own in Evanston? Probably about...
Between the both.
Yeah,
you
between both
and-
groups,
yeah.
probably about somewhere in the neighborhood of 300.
And when you say both groups, you mean you and
Evanston
your partner?
Bond
Right.
is a partner, yeah.
Sorry, that was 300 units?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to clarify, I found it on a slide. It was 55% that we were asking for last time. And the impervious was 62%.
And to go at your question about have there been other properties of this size, by my calculation, I think you got to have about 20 units before you can get an affordable on-site. But, you know, that's just by our calculation.
Thank you.
She's finally there.
Would you find it? Yes. So what exactly was your question?
I'm trying to understand the difference between the columns that are labeled regulation and as-of-right proposal.
The regulation is what the zoning ordinance specifically permits, the maximum allowed. As of right proposal, that was a staff estimate that if you were to construct 10 dwelling units on the property, then it's estimated that you would be at 39% building lot coverage. And that was based off of the type of proposal that was given. It was basically chopping off the extra units to come to that, to see whether or not you could comply with the building lot coverage in conjunction with the density requirement.
Do you guys have questions?
While I agree with what Mary Beth has been going through with the difference between accessible and adaptable, I really would like to know what the community has to say about the revised proposal from 14 to 12.
I have a couple more questions for you guys before, sorry. Just giving other people a chance. Did you guys, how much is the accessible component adding to the cost of the project? And would it be possible to offset that with making an affordable unit?
I think part of it is that you have to build it's hard to put a dollar to it. We tried to estimate per unit. You've got larger doors, larger clearances. If we did this unit that wasn't adaptable or accessible, the unit size would come down for a 2-bedroom because a lot of the square footage that you can see here, if I get to the unit, is actually within the kind of bathrooms and corridors, which are kind of a lost space. So trying to cut down on the cost would be kind of shrinking the unit. So these bathrooms are quite large. This hallway in here has to allow for a 5-foot turning radius. So, you know, in a home, you're usually looking at a 3'4" to 3'6" hallway. These are 5-foot hallways so that you have the ability to turn, as well as in the large master bedroom and the closet. So it's hard to say the cost is kind of a built-in cost within the units to try to say that you build some of them not. Would that offset? I don't know if you could really run the numbers. They're kind of apples to oranges, I would imagine it as the way it works. I think the con against it is, you know, a 9-unit as of right, which would make more income, does not have any inclusionary dollars going into the housing because we're 9, not 10. So, nor any public benefits. So we were kind of comparing what could we do with the property? How do we prove that we're not doing this to make more money? The idea and the intent is to work within the neighborhood and the neighbor and what we feel this area of Evanston is requesting. And so a 9-unit as of right has no public benefit, no payment into inclusionary housing because we're below the 10 threshold. And that was kind of our balance. We could do this, but we're in front of you asking for this because we feel it has a lot of pros for everyone, Evanston itself, the neighborhood, building housing that's going to be needed more in the future than a 3-level. And a 3-level will be something that people are interested in that neighborhood because there's so many single families. It's a very desirable spot. So whether you do 2 bedrooms versus 3 bedrooms, I don't think it was purely an economical. It was kind of more of a, is there benefit to doing 2 and are they going to be more desirable? Yes, but I think the 3 bedrooms will be just as desirable in a kind of 9-unit.
I have some questions about the affordable unit economic viability. So, I mean, I was just trying to put some numbers together on my own, and I admittedly haven't studied it for 2 years, and admittedly, this is not my strong suit, but tell me where I'm going wrong on this. So in the prior proposal, between the prior proposal and this proposal, you're saving approximately $250,000
On the cost to build.
on the cost to build.
But we're also losing
I'm
income.
gonna get there.
Okay.
I'm trying to account for everything, so tell me where I'm going wrong, though. So the prior proposal, though, at 14 units was economically feasible to you, and you're saving $250,000 approximately on the cost here. You're losing 2 units, so you're losing approximately at $2,500 a month, $60,000 a year in rent. Okay. So that's a $190,000 net gain between the costs and the revenues, or thereabouts. If you take the $75,000 you're willing to pay into the city and instead put that into your net savings, now you're at $265,000. So on a $9,600 a year unit, it's going to take you 27 years before you come out behind on having an affordable unit. I may have oversimplified it, but isn't that about right? What am I missing?
I need to go to a bank with a rent roll that can justify a loan to take this construction loan out. Right now, at the $2,500 times 12 units, I have maxed out my loan. Anything more that we do has to come from equity. My partners aren't willing to put any more equity into this. They think we're crazy to still be here. I still believe in this product and that this is something that the community wants. And maybe we need the neighbors to tell us is what they want so that we are all convinced that that's what they want. But unfortunately, the economics are such that we are maxed out at the loan, so the rest of this project is equity.
But your
So now-
loan is $250,000 lower than it was 2 months ago.
No, it's not, because at 14 units, I couldn't afford to do an affordable housing unit either. Now I can just afford it a little bit less. The cost of that affordable housing unit over the life of this project, or let's take a look at it the way you said.
Your loan is $250,000 lower.
$60,000 less in rent translates into $600,000 less in value. So now my
Over how long?
market value, the price at which this property can be sold, at which the loan is based off of. In other words, I have $600,000 times 75% less loan borrowing power by taking those 2 units off. So I've taken off $450,000 off of that loan
Of value.
of money I can borrow to make this project work. So believe me, I think when you guys go to look at revising the inclusionary housing ordinance, when you do the numbers, you're going to find out that the threshold for inclusionary on-site is closer to 20 units. Now,
It sounds though like that's an issue with the equity investors in development.
it sounds like that's an issue for the people who are going to build at Chicago Avenue and Howard
Right.
and anybody, because there's not an endless pool of money here. There are projects that can be done other ways in other places, even on site here. So we have come to a point where we are trying to do what we hear from the neighbors, what you guys said to do in terms of come together and come up with a compromise. I think this is a viable compromise, especially when you talk about the precedent that you're worried about setting, and that is by not approving this, the precedent you set is build me a 2.5-story, 5-foot side yard setbacks, a behemoth next to what's there now. This fits better, but it requires a variance. You know, the ultimate decision, of course, is yours, but maybe we should let the neighbors tell you what they think. Because we've listened to everybody. We've met with everybody. From February till now, we've had more meetings with everybody else. We've looked at all the plans again. We've started over, and we come to a relatively the same conclusion. This is the product that this neighborhood and the city of Evanston needs, and it's only going to need more of it as time goes on. Because in a neighborhood, you're not going to find a 16-story elevator building that has handicap living. But for those who want to move out of their current home and stay in a neighborhood feel where they can maybe go outside and see some flowers in the garden, it's not there in the high rises. So we're trying to serve a market. We're trying to listen to the neighbors and be accommodating to what their concerns are. And I think we've met that. But unfortunately, the zoning ordinance says, go build us something bigger. rather than something smaller.
So don't let the content or the tone of my questions fool you. I think what you've done in the last 2 months on this project is great. But I'm still struggling to understand why the pushback on making a unit affordable is so strong.
Because we can't afford it. And I'm not going to go into this and go talk to my partners and say, we're the experts in this business, and we're going to come into you in a project that's going to require, additional input of cash as time goes on to keep this thing going. We don't have thousands of units in Evanston or anywhere because we don't go out and just buy. The price that people are paying for these apartment buildings right now is astronomical. You'll never see me buy a building at those kinds of numbers. If it's not positive cash flow from day one and it can't support itself, you won't see me involved in it. I'm not going to put myself in a position where when the market tanks, I lose my shirt. I'm going to go in there conservatively, and I'm going to go in there for the long haul to serve the community and to be a part of this community like we have for the last 50 years. You've never seen any of our projects go under, and you never will, because we are conservative, and we're not going to change that. So if we had an opportunity to do a larger building with more units, we could probably incorporate an on-site affordable housing situation. With 12 units and the kind of infrastructure costs that we have, unfortunately, it's just not viable.
So let me just follow up to my own question, and I think I know the answers. But do you have a lender lined up for this project
Yes.
at this scale that's being proposed tonight?
Yes, we do.
And did you ask that lender if they would finance it if there was an affordable housing unit included?
We asked them if the rent roll was lessened by the amount of money we were talking about, could we still borrow the same amount of money? And the answer was no.
Okay. And what amount of money, how much less did they tell you you could borrow if there was an affordable unit?
It's based on income, right?
Yeah, it's based on income. And so I think the number is around $500,000.
$500,000 less
Yes.
of a loan?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
No, you can have a seat.
Oh, okay.
You've been going crazy. I got questions for your architect now. Last question on minimum change necessary, least deviation possible, right? You've got those garages set up at 14 feet per car. That is like sweet living in Evanston. You know the garages here in Evanston are about 8.5 feet per car.
I
So
think
imagine, if you will, you just took
it's
2
also
feet off.
Also bike parking.
No, they don't
Car.
require it that big. They don't require it to be that big. But if you could provide 10 to 12 foot per car, right? You could squeeze down those garages, save some money on construction, and lower your building lot coverage.
Yeah, I think we have. I thought they were quite tight because you need the swing of the door to get out.
They're so
and you've
generous.
got the garage on the side. The other thing that we're designing these for is people who have mobility issues. So if their garage is too small for them to get out into their walker or their wheelchair, I don't know what benefit that will do them. So we're trying to balance
We also know that at least half of these units aren't necessarily going to be that way. So you have the opportunity to make some modifications to that width. I think that there's probably some tightening up that could happen there.
I think there would be, but I don't think it would, the amount of tightening we'd have to do to not ask for that variance would not be.
No, it would just decrease it further.
It would decrease it further.
We love
And we
how
could
much it
definitely,
decreased. Let's keep
we could
decreasing.
definitely look at that and decrease and tighten them as
Yeah.
needed. I must say, though, that people who live on the second floor, if they use walkers to get around and go upstairs, it's hard to maneuver out of a walker.
How do you use a walker up a stair?
So my mother is fine when she needs a walker or an assistant cane to get up where she's going, and once she's where she's at, she's fine. So you have a lot of folks in that transitional period who need it temporarily. Sometimes what they do is their health issue causes them to be weaker and they need something to hold on to push themselves in and out of a chair. So I think we wanted to make sure that we weren't boxing someone in and not being able to maneuver. A lot of times also the vans that folks use are a little bit larger as well. So it was just us trying to make sure that in those spots we had that ability. Also the garage doors themselves, making sure folks can make that tight turn into the alley. I know when I used to ride with my grandfather, he was a good driver, but those tight turns were a little Eileen, can you go check out the side and make sure there's nothing? I'm not going to hit anything. So that's kind of where we came from. But I'm sure we could look at tightening them up if possible.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We're done? Okay. Thanks very much. Appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time. All right. We have some neighbors who would like to speak. There are 5 people who have signed in. Hopefully, you're all for this project. So the first one is Sigrid Pilgrim. Did I get that right? Yeah. Did I swear you in? You didn't come in late, right?
No.
Okay. You've been here for the whole glorious time?
Yes, I was here before. My name is Sigrid Pilgrim. I reside at 2750 Bernard Place and have lived there since 1983. I've been a resident of the city of Evanston since 1966, and I offer my support for the Central Street project proposed by Highlands on Central and Schermerhorn. The proposal, in my opinion, has much merit as it offers long-time Evanston residents, such as myself and my husband, the opportunity to remain in a neighborhood and town we love, even if we may no longer be able to take care of our very, very, very large backyard. I understand the concerns of some of the neighbors about the possible increase in density. However, I cannot see how 12 two-bedroom units, likely to be occupied by a retired or elderly couple, could increase the density more than what is allowed by right, up to 3-bedroom living units at a larger building height. Given that the developers are asking for 2 small variances from the current building code, which I understand are 12 units rather than 10, and a larger foot imprint of the building from 40% to 46.5%, I would like to ask you the following. Why do you enforce building ordinances selectively? You may recall that the Albion developers asked for 5 building variances, that is building height, number of units, number of parking spaces, floor to area ratio, and cigarette-shaped setbacks. Reading some of the articles on the issue, it seems that the variances requested by Albion are significantly more diverging from the building code than what is proposed for the Central Street project. Building height of 156 units with code allowing 105, 287 residential units with code allowing 105, 186 parking spaces where code required 389 based on the number of dwelling units, and I do have to admit, this is based on 3 articles which I read in the roundtable. If you are favoring large developers by not enforcing your own building code and granting these variances, I respectfully ask you to also favor longtime Evanston residents who may look forward to being able to continue to live in an area of our town and not necessarily have to move to a retirement community. I found the various exchanges very interesting. I have to admit this is my first appearance at this illustrious body, but I would really request that you seriously consider what I think is a wonderful proposal for our city. And given the fact that your own ordinances require payment to the affordable housing unit, the developers are making a proposal to give money. So I have copies for you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're going to put this in as exhibit, what do we want to call this? 1A. Just to respond quickly to your question, you asked the difference. So the Albion development is what's called a planned unit development, and that is for developments that are of a certain size. And developments of a certain size go through a different process. They go through Plan Commission, and there it's negotiated, the trade-offs. So we, as your Zoning Board of Appeals, have nothing to do with that. We have no control over that.
So in other words, building codes are enforced kind of whoever feels like enforcing them?
No, that is not the way it goes. It's just the planned unit development is a different process when you have much When you have much bigger buildings that have a much bigger impact on the city, the process is different, and that process does not involve us. So your concerns are really with the Plan Commission, and I would encourage you to go to one of their meetings and have a conversation with those folks, because I think you might get a better answer. You might get the answers you're looking for. Okay, so that was the first one. How about Michael Sultan? Yeah. Send that down.
Hi, you swore me in.
Oh, fantastic.
Good evening. I live at 3225 Central Street. I'm president of the Central Street Townhouse Association. We have 8 units. In talking to our other unit owners, almost all of us agree this would be a benefit. I might be one of the people that Mr. Schoenhorn mentioned about coming and buying our buildings at some point. Ours were built in 1955. I've been there for 14 years. I grew up in Evanston, moved here in 1955. So, 1955 we moved here too, when our buildings were built that I live in now. I would like to say that I, again, am in favor of this development. It would be an attractive addition to our neighborhood in the Central Street corridor. It's not as dense as their right is that they can build. As you all heard, I think what they could build would be a kind of a monstrosity on Central Street, and I ask you to consider that heavily because this is a much better looking. They're taken into consideration. I went to the additional meetings and looked at the new proposal. It cuts back on a number of areas that residents wanted. I think some of the comments that were made by residents here previously, as I said in the roundtable, were kind of goofy, because I went and inspected garages in our alley and looked at certain parts of the street and really had no bearing on this project, which I think would have been all right even at 14 units. The owners have addressed the issues that were raised at the last meeting, and I believe they have addressed the problems that some of the neighbors have raised. Besides, what it provides them and their partners is a benefit to our community, the way they have proposed it. The extras that they're providing, such as the bus stop, would be closer to my home when I'm heading west, when I take the bus from the L. And like they said, you get off in dirt right now, unless you get the bus driver to stop at a sidewalk, which is seldom. I think this project will enhance our area and be an asset for Evanston and should receive an affirmative vote from each of you on the council. I'd also like to make as my last point that the city does not provide any gravel when they pave, when they grade our alley. All they do is run a grader up and down it and then a flattening thing. There's been no gravel added, and when I spoke to the city about that, they can't afford it. So I think this would be a benefit to all the homes that are on both sides, the Hartsel side and our side, by the dumping of additional gravel. It seems like a minor thing. You go, hey, what's the big benefit to the community? To our little community, it would be a big benefit. And I thank you for voting affirmative, I hope, for this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt Stork?
Hi, I'm Matt Stork. I live at 2545 Hastings Avenue, so kind of at the edge of the neighborhood for this proposal, and I like it. I don't see a problem here. What I see is an out of scale for the area, and I think it would add a little diversity to the size and shape of the buildings in the area. I feel strict adherence to the zoning rules is not helping the community at this time. Change happens. I'm willing to accept nothing in this world is perfect, and I have no desire to stand in the way in this project, in the way of progress, excuse me. I very much like to see these apartments built as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Sue Lullabach?
Good evening. My name is Sue Lolbach. I work at Connections for the Homeless, and I head up a coalition called Joining Forces for Affordable Housing. We're a group of about 30 human services agencies, communities of faith, and individuals that advocate for affordable housing because the lack of affordable housing is such a huge detrimental issue in the city. We very much support DAPR's recommendation that this development include an affordable housing unit, and we are glad to see that DAPR and this body are taking that piece of the code so seriously and really trying to move towards on-site inclusion of the units. I think the developers make a compelling argument, but all of the developers we have heard from make compelling arguments about the expense of including affordable units. Given that our current neighborhood layouts, the way that neighborhoods are constructed in terms of various incomes, racial makeup, and so on. Those patterns were created through exclusionary zoning many, many years ago. The inclusionary housing ordinance is the only tool that we have available to make very tangible changes to those patterns. So Joining Forces is really advocating that both developers and the people who are making the decisions at the municipal level push to have the units on site. There are many ways to come up with equivalent alternatives. It doesn't have to be an either-or kind of thing. This developer has quite a few units in the community. I would love to know how many of them are affordable. I would like to know what neighborhoods they're affordable in, and I would like to know if there would be the opportunity, if it won't work in this development, to put affordable units in some of his other developments in neighborhoods that provide the same benefits that this neighborhood would provide. So I ask that everybody look at this even harder. I know it's been a lot of work, but this is really important. This is the direction that development has to go if we're going to be solving this problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Kathy Leone.
Hello, everyone. Kathy Leone, 3253 Central Street. I'm in the property just west of the proposed units. First of all, I'll say I was one of the people vehemently against the 14-unit property for a variety of reasons, density of units and the size of the space, that the property was going to be taking up. I attended the meeting at Lovelace Park where Schermerhorns did a presentation, and I listened to everything that they had to say, and I feel quite strongly that the 12-unit proposed property is the best, at least in terms of the neighbors and the neighborhood. One of my big concerns about the 9-unit, what I'll call vertical living space, or I'm not sure if it's 9 or 10, there would end up being very, very little green space in the property. And there's actually quite a lot of green space around there now, and I feel like that's already going to be a loss, but the way they've designed it with the 12 units, there is going to be a lot more green space. So that is a benefit to the neighborhood, in my opinion. The other thing is, at that meeting, there were, I don't know, I guess I would have guessed 20 and 24 people, and I would say at least 20 people raised their hand in favor of the 12-unit property. So I just want to say that, just want to confirm that did happen. I do have a couple of questions this would more be for the city and both groups. Originally, there were 9 parking spaces in back of the property, and our alley already was kind of a mess. I am concerned about going up to 20 parking spaces in that alley because when it rains and it's muddy, that alley really does become a mess, and that's going to be a lot more traffic in the alley. And that's a necessity no matter what happens, that you know that there's going to be more parking back there. And so I was just wondering if it's possible for the city to consider something called, which I think they've done in other places, recycled asphalt, which I think is pervious, and do that until they can come up with the solution of actually paving and the paving with the sewers. That's just something I would question for the city. The one other thing I would want to ask about is very practical things about garbage cans. And the alleys are already pretty tight in terms and I don't know if that's a solution you can solve at this meeting, but those are things just I have to ask. And last but not least, after the meeting, I was at the meeting, and I think it was Bill or Dan mentioned there are air conditioning units that are on the side of the property, and they'd be virtually right next to my backyard. And he mentioned that they could be moved toward the front, away, not in the front of the building, but front side of the yard. And I was wondering, and I would like to get that, if possible, on record, that we could actually do that. The other thing, he agreed to building as much greenery as possible around the air conditioning units. But I'm also wondering if it's possible to build some kind of, in addition to the greenery, some kind of screening. And I guess I'm very concerned about having, I think it's going to be at least 4 air conditioning units, again, right next to my house. That being said, I also recognize it is about 25 feet, according to the new zoning proposal, that it's about 25 feet from my house. So that does help quite a bit, but I still think it's worth asking. So those are my comments. Otherwise, I would be very concerned about the 9-unit, huge footprint, very little green space. And I have some friends that live in what they call vertical living. I don't know, that surprises me that there's a demand for that. I know that there is a demand for accessible living. So anyway, I thank you very much for listening.
Hey, Kathy, before you go, I have a couple questions for you. The first is, do you have a fence on your property?
No, we have lilac bushes.
Okay, so you just have shrubs.
We have
Okay.
shrubs, yeah.
And it's remarkable, your turnaround in your approach to this project, in your reaction to this project. Can you talk a little bit more about how that occurred?
I'm not sure what you mean.
At the very first application, right? Dead set against this.
Completely.
Worst thing ever.
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
Absolutely. I see what you're saying.
We understood
Yes.
what you were saying.
Yes.
And now.
Yeah. I think the big thing.
I'm curious about that.
Absolutely. The big thing is the space between our home and the new building. Because if they remove 2 units, they take off 25 feet on each side. And that is where the additional green space is. Because right now where we live, there are no garages, and then there's the front lawn. And I have to admit, I will walk my little dogs back there too. And, that's an aside, but that is the driving force. And that I also felt that Schermerhorn was he approached me about moving the air conditioners when I mentioned about it, and I really appreciated that. So that's the main reason. I'm obviously very invested in the fact that the property is going to be right next to me. I liked the little cottages. They were really cute. I wish those wouldn't have gone away. They could have just been renovated, but I recognize that's not the way it is. So I believe the building new properties will ultimately, I guess, enhance the look of the neighborhood. But so does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I did walk around, and I know you received my mail-in about the other people who supported the project. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much.
And I'd like to get a grab bar installed in my bathroom, by the way.
You got to move next door. Okay, so did you guys want to come up, and is there anything you want to respond to? Is there a summary you'd like to say?
I was just going to answer her questions about the air conditioning. So we are 25 feet away, and there is a zoning ordinance requirement about the decibels at the property line, which I think it's 25. And because we're 25 feet away, we're going to do really well on that aspect.
Right.
Also, the greenery that's going around there is evergreens, so that will help shield it. You need them to breathe, but I think you're going to like greenery as opposed to something more mechanical.
Yeah, I was just
thinking both.
I'm going to reinforce, back up the architect here, which is when you put a hard surface, then the
bounces.
It just bounces. The sound
It
bounces, and it's worse.
And it doesn't look as attractive as a cross and green.
It's a terrible solution.
The other
Greenery is the best.
Yes, our greenery is the best. The other thing that I think people who are concerned about the alley, right now it's just open parking. That whole property does not meet any of the requirements because it was built so long ago for water management, and the whole neighborhood is like that. So there's a lot of water that drains off into that area, and that crown in the alley is quite large. The benefit for us building and enclosing the garages is we have downspouts off of our roofs that go into our stormwater management system. So we will not be adding extra water. We'll be taking less water. Even though we may have more cars, when storms, et cetera, happen, we can't drain into that zone now at all, and we have it all downspouted. So having those covered garages is a much better benefit for everyone in the neighborhood moving forward than the open spaces. So I just wanted to kind of answer those questions about the space.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to clarify our proposal with the alley. So I met with Edgar from the city, and we talked about you can't pave it, you can't do certain things. But what I basically suggested, they do grade and roll it 3 times a year. So what I recommended is to bring 3 semi-loads up front, especially when you head east. It gets low, it gets really a lot of potholes, and they have not added, any kind of gravel for years, a long time. So that's certainly going to help. And then what I was also thinking was about halfway through the project, we would also bring in another 3 semi-loads and cap off the whole thing. And we are going to come and go from the west side. We'll maintain that. Just like if we were to drag mud out on the street, we would clean it right away. So we're going to maintain whatever we do. But my thoughts were then we bring in another 4 semi-loads at the end and cap the whole thing off. And we would coordinate that so it would get put in, graded, and rolled. So it's going to help that alley a tremendous amount. And, that was one of the concerns that they had. So I just wanted to clarify that's what our proposal is.
Thank you. The other Mr. Skirmerhorn, I got a quick question for you. This may be a non-legal idea, so I'm just throwing it out there because nobody likes it. Is it possible to provide an affordable unit at one of your other buildings?
We actually talked about that with Sarah Flax. We had a meeting with her. We've met
Sarah
with her
and
twice.
We think the same way.
and we, unfortunately, the requirement, from what she understands, what we discussed, is equivalent. And that was the hard part, is finding an equivalent unit in another site. Most of the
Meaning a
buildings-
2-bedroom?
No, meaning zero threshold, things of that nature that would make it equal to what we're offering here. We have a lot of buildings that are vintage.
Except that
three-story
doesn't it
walk-up.
count for the second floor, though, right? Because the second floor is walk-up, so it doesn't have to meet those requirements.
She said the neighborhood is very important. So, because we have other buildings in Evanston that have Section 8 tenants in them. So we achieve, we participate in the affordable housing program in that regard. We don't have any other new constructions, so we don't have any other of the inclusionary housing, specifically. But of course, Section 8 housing is available to any unit in Evanston per the Cook County ordinance. And the other problem was we don't have another project that is owned by this group. So how do we impose that on?
Because you're partners just for this project.
Right. So that was, we looked at all these different things. The other thing was that she wasn't sure where the approval process would have to lead to do this and how that would delay the project.
Yeah.
And we really are kind of at a point now where We are, Cook County wants those properties down because you get a demolition permit from the
yep.
county and it's only good for so long.
Yep.
So we don't really want to delay this any further. So we have looked at that extensively with her in terms of on-site, off-site. We learned about the whole process of how the AMI fits into it. And so we went through all those variations with her. So, anything else?
Okay, thanks very much. Appreciate it. Is there anybody else who had anything else that they wanted to say?
Any comment about recycled asphalt?
Got to come up
Oh, sorry.
because nobody heard you.
Any thoughts about recycled asphalt? Because it is
Sounds like a great idea, but that's way outside of the purview of the zoning board.
Way above our pay grade. Way, way, way.
Can I also answer that a little bit? Because in talking with Edgar at the city, the worry was, because of the slope of that alley, that if we do anything that causes more runoff, even though it's pervious asphalt, it's going to have a greater runoff capacity than gravel would or something like that. So we don't want to cause a problem for the neighbors at the lower end of the alley in terms of pooling and puddling of water. Even though we have stormwater management to capture what we produce, we can't control what goes running down the alley, and the thought was that that would probably create a river situation. So until they can put in the structure in the alley to capture that water, I think any type of paving would really sound great, but the people at the bottom of the hill would probably be pulling their hair out. Yeah. So.
Great, thank you very much. Anybody else? Last call. Last call. All right, we're going to close the record and deliberate.
I'll be happy to start.
Yeah.
So I was serious when I said earlier that what you've done over the last 2 months to change the proposal is significant in my view. And I think it's telling that at the last meeting there were maybe 10 neighbors that stood up to express their disapproval of the project in a public forum with notice, and tonight there were no neighbors that did that, although there was at least a plea for compliance with the affordable housing ordinance. In fact, 2 of the people that spoke tonight spoke at the last meeting opposed to the proposal, and again, I think that's a big deal. I also I think, I remember at the last meeting, for me, what swayed my opinion was the imposition of 14 units against what I perceive to be an unequal public benefit. And I do think by cutting 2 units down and by increasing the public benefit ever so slightly with gravel, in my view, that does sort of sway my opinion on the balance a little bit. I'm really troubled by the pushback on including an affordable unit. And I understand the testimony about the economics of the project. It doesn't mesh with my common sense or with the numbers I worked out simply to myself. I think, here on the public record, there's a problem with the ordinance in that the amount of quote-unquote penalty at $75,000 seems to be over and over when the issue comes in front of us, too small a penalty to encourage developers to include affordable units. But it is what it is, and I'm moved certainly closer to being in approval of the project than I was 2 months ago, but I'm really on the fence, including because of the affordable unit issue.
I'll go ahead and jump in. I think what's telling is the amount of questions and conversation we're having this evening, in part because of the inclusionary housing ordinance. On its face, in terms of the project itself, I think the applicant has done a lot since they first came before the zoning board in terms of making changes that both reduce the number of variances and go a long way in terms of meeting the requests and concerns of the neighborhood, so I applaud the applicant for that. I certainly respect DAPR's recommendation that they supported the proposal conditioned on the fact that an on-site affordable housing unit be included. And I, in principle, agree with Ms. Lolbach, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, that we as a community are struggling with this issue of providing affordable housing, and I care for that. I respect that and I support that, and I think that's reflected in our consideration and our questions and our comments. I do find that this project is very different than a downtown high-rise where the cost can be spread across a greater number of units. And so I'm struggling with the inclusionary housing issue myself. Certainly we don't have the benefit of seeing pro formas. So we are making judgment based on the testimony offered to us this evening. So those are some of my questions, but the city continues to look at its inclusionary housing ordinance and at what levels on-site units are required, et cetera. I would like to point out that the applicant is meeting the inclusionary housing ordinance by paying into the fund, though is not meeting the on-site requirement. And so that is something that I'm struggling with, because I agree in principle with what we as a community are trying to do. However, I do appreciate the size of the project and how that manifests in terms of development, the financials of the project.
I also am impressed with, I agree with your comments, Scott, about how far the developer has come to work with the community, because you're right. Most of these people that were here, I expected them to say the same things, and they have completely done a sea change in how they feel about this development. Plus, the larger open space, I feel like, makes it more in keeping with the community. I'd love to see it perfect. I'd love to see a way that we can enforce the inclusionary housing ordinance. I'm not sure how we can do that within the parameters of our powers here, but I feel like the changes that he's made in this development have made it more feasible for this site.
I agree with everything that's been said from my colleagues here. I'm so glad that you took to heart the comments that were given to you at the last meeting, and you met with the community, you included them, and from this meeting, we can see the vast turnaround from the neighbors and the neighborhood. So I'm actually in favor of what you've done. I think I was the one that said it the last time. You could go build your 10-unit building, not include the neighbors, not include anything that they have to do, and just basically push them aside. And I'm so glad that you actually included them, and you've made them happy with your new proposal.
Thank you. So here's where I'm at. I, as you know from our discussion, I had a big problem with the idea that we were doing inclusionary housing, but it really wasn't going to be accessible. It was just going to be adaptable. And for me, that really didn't deliver on the promise of inclusionary housing. So for me, this inclusionary housing is not just for lower income people, but it's for everyone across all spectrums of abilities. And so the fact that you're providing housing that is like that is exciting to me, because again, that's a very rare occurrence. But to deliver on the promise of that housing, I think that those first floor units have to be accessible, not adaptable, which is to say those countertops need to be lower from the get-go so that it's not as attractive to able-bodied people right. I know you guys don't care because you'll move them if somebody wants it, which is fine. But I just think that the opportunity is that it will be less attractive to an able-bodied person. And I think so for me, there's this weighing of affordable housing with now accessible housing for 5 people. Six people. And so there's that trade-off for me between those two. Combined with shrinking those garages, get them a little tighter. And I think that you have actually swayed me by being willing to make those units accessible and not adaptable.
I heard a will do it off the mic, so.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the record's closed, but.
Yeah. Well, it will be part of conditions if that's where we end, if anybody else agrees with me.
I agree with you on the accessible. I'm not sure the garage space at the current plan will matter.
I'm always a fan for tightening stuff up.
I also just
save a couple bucks.
Just because it's going to affect the conditions we impose for the sake of debating the issue. I also do agree that if we're going to have accessible units, that the garage spaces ought to be a little bit bigger and also themselves ought to be quote unquote accessible.
Can we agree that 6 should be accessible and the others don't? I mean, there's one surface space that is fully accessible, right?
I get your
I
point.
know.
I don't see the need for that condition.
And actually, an accessible space is 16 feet.
Yeah.
So if they're...
But there is one on site.
No, I understand that. But
Yeah.
if you wanted to make all the other ones accessible, they have 15 feet. If you're going by what a handicapped space is, which would be 16 feet.
Right.
So...
Oh, you guys, you're killing me.
I would, Mary Beth, can I jump back in?
Yeah.
I would just add, I have a neighbor who they put their home on the market. They have a single-family home, and they've adapted their single-family home. The gentleman is in a wheelchair, and they had an offer on their home. They looked at some of the downtown high-rises, ultimately took their house off the market because they could not find housing that was suitable to his needs. So I do think that there is a need here, and as the population continues to age and the baby boomers age, there is a need in our community both at an affordability level but also at an accessibility level, however you want to define those. The way I'm broadly defining them, I think that if we get caught up on some of these issues so that we make it difficult to build a broader product type in the community, then the community is not best served.
I think you're actually on the same page with one another. So I think the point made in the last meeting was that if we didn't commit the units to be accessible, that marketing them as that wouldn't matter. And I think the point Mary Beth made tonight, which I think is a good one, is most people don't want to stay in the accessible room in the hotel because it's different or the counter is lower from the get-go or whatever. But if there's a commitment here to have 6 accessible units from the get-go, that need will be served. Am I right?
You are. Absolutely. Okay. So, where are we going with this?
Well,
What are the conditions?
to me, so let me just sum up,
Yeah.
I think, where I came out on this.
Yeah.
So I am troubled by the steadfast refusal to be able to have an affordable unit. However,
Yeah.
the ordinance requires A or B, and they are doing B. And
Yep.
that's a problem with the ordinance and not with this development. And so I don't feel comfortable rejecting what's otherwise, I think, a very good proposal for a space that needs it based on what ought to be done instead of what meets the requirement of the ordinance.
Right.
So I am in favor of the proposal with appropriate conditions that in my view, I agree, would include that those bottom 6 units be accessible from the get-go. And there was a commitment for that on the record, so I think that that is, actually, there wasn't on the record,
Right.
but I think if we include that as a condition, then I'm
Right.
satisfied that development in accordance with the testimony in the record really is enough of a condition.
Okay. Okay. Do we want to address Ms. Leone's concerns about her AC units and moving those forward?
My personal view on that is that as long as the units are placed in a place that complies with the ordinance, that's between
The two
Ms.
neighbors?
Leone and the developer.
Okay.
I'd rather not impose a condition that
Right.
requires the unit to be placed somewhere because that's not something we do, and it's also not something that's required.
Right. Okay.
And I think at 25 feet from her property, it's most likely not going to be a sound issue for her, and it
Right.
sounds like it'll be masked quite a bit by the greenery.
Right. I still want smaller garages. Okay. Okay. Anybody else? Everybody's okay with that? Okay. May I have a motion, please? Oh, did
I
we miss
move
something?
that you go through the standards.
Oh, Jesus. You want to do them? It's 20 after 9. I'm tired, and we still got one more to go. Okay, so let's go through the standards for major variations. There are 7 of them. Number 1, the requested variation will not have a substantial adverse impact on the use, enjoyment, or property values of adjoining properties. We've had testimony from neighbors who were previously opposed to the project, who are now in favor of it, and so that gives credence to the concept that there will be no substantial adverse impact on the use, enjoyment, or property values of the adjoining properties. So I do believe that that standard has been met.
I agree. I would just actually add, I think the variation will have a lower substantial adverse impact than a proposed development within the letter of the ordinance
I agree with that.
in this unique case.
Number 2, the requested variation is in keeping with the intent of the zoning ordinance. The intent is to be able to allow development and provide housing that is in keeping with needs of the community. So I do believe that that standard has been met. Number 3, the alleged hardship or practical difficulty is peculiar to the property. In this, where are we on this one? In this case, the hardship there.
I think what's peculiar to the property in this instance is that it's a large property conducive to building multiple units, and that units built at scale with what's allowed by the ordinance is not desirable for what's developed around the property. And therefore, the challenge to develop that space within the context of what surrounds it makes it a hardship that is peculiar to the property.
Thank you. Number 4, the property owner would suffer a particular hardship or practical difficulty as distinguished from a mere inconvenience if the strict letter of the regulations were to be carried out. In this case, without the zoning relief, the development would need to be smaller in scale so that they could have fewer dwelling units, which then changes the economics of the situation such that they then revert to the idea of what is by right, which we have now determined is not what the neighbors prefer. So I do believe that that standard, that is a particular hardship, and I do believe that that standard has been met. Number 5, the purpose of the variation is not based exclusively upon a desire to extract additional income, but there are some public benefits. We've gone over what some of those public benefits are, and most of them are what were discussed with the last proposal. The 2 big improvements to the public benefits this time are taking care of the alleyway for the neighbors with additional gravel loads and screenings and compaction, as well as making those 6 units on the first floor handicapped accessible from the get-go, which I think is going to be is a major public benefit because that product really doesn't exist. So I do believe that that standard has been met. Number 6, the alleged difficulty or hardship has not been created by any person having an interest in the property. They've owned this property for many years, and I don't believe that any of the changes here are as a result of their owning the property. So I believe that standard has been met. Number 7, it is limited. The request for variation requires the least deviation from the applicable regulation among the feasible options identified before the Zoning Board of Appeals. We've talked at length about that, right? What is the minimum required and what is not the minimum required? And so if we agree that the public benefit is that they are handicapped accessible housing, then the changes to the garage the garages are the minimum change that are necessary, and that there isn't an opportunity to tighten those up. And so I do believe that standard has been met.
I agree with your assessment, and I'll make a motion. So I move in the matter ZBA 18 ZMJV-0025 with respect to the property located at 3233 through 3249 Central Street, that we approve the major zoning relief requested, subject to the condition that the property be developed in accordance with the testimony and documents submitted, including in particular, and if it's not on the record, along with the additional condition that the ground floor 6 units be handicap accessible from the time they go to market.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And with a vote of 5-0, your project has been approved. Good luck with your project. Okay. Do we need a 5-minute break? Yeah, sorry, we're going to take a 5-minute break.
That was. So now it's time. I'm so mad about that. I can't even figure out, but I'm going back to sleep. Because really, I did all this on $6,000. They could. they couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm trying to say? Happy birthday,
Okay, we're back on the record. Thanks for your patience. We appreciate that. Okay, so the next case is, you guys have been waiting here so patiently, 2035 Dodge Avenue. Yeah, it seems like we should read that into the record.
My name's Junior Anderson.
Hang on.
Oh.
So Melissa's going to read the case into the record, and then we're going to, and then I got to do all sorts of stuff with you because you weren't here when we started.
Junior Anderson, property owner, applies for major zoning relief to construct a two-family residence with a detached garage in the R3 two-family residential district. The applicant requests two dwelling units on a total lot size of 5,943 square feet, where a minimum 7,000 square foot lot size is required for two-family residences, zoning code section 6844. The Zoning Board of Appeals is the determining body for this case. Documents included as part of the record include variation application submitted March 20th, 2018, zoning analysis, plat of survey, site plans and elevations, image of property, aerial view of property, zoning map of property, Dapper meeting minutes excerpt of April 4th, 2018, and Dapper draft meeting minutes of April 11th, 2018, as well as documents submitted at the beginning of the meeting that include updated elevations, an updated front color elevation that didn't come out in color very well, so I do have a better copy for everyone, and a written affordable housing proposal.
Great, thank you so much. Mr. Anderson, before we get started, as we look through your documents, and we want to be as thorough as possible, we notice that there are quite a few inconsistencies between plan, elevation, section, all sorts of things, right? From dimensions to materials to the way that things are actually going to look. And in order for us to be able to evaluate your case fairly, we'd like that information to be as correct as possible. So what we'd like to do is give you an opportunity to continue the case, and we'll pick a date tonight so you know when it is, where you can get all of that information corrected so that we know, so you can come with a building that's actually going to look like what you're proposing.
What is it that's different? I sent Melissa the updated architect drawing that says it's vinyl siding. Is that what it is?
Okay. No, there's actually more things. So for example, your plan says the building's 20 feet wide, but the plat of survey says it's 22 feet wide. The building section says that you have hardy plank on the outside, but your elevations show vinyl. The building section shows the roof, the second floor being 9 feet, so that would move the roof down, versus where the roof is in that elevation, they can't possibly be in the same location. So it's just, we're not getting.
Did I give you the updated drawings Monday, and it still says the same?
Yes, the ZBA packet posted last Friday, so the last couple of emails that you sent me, they got that at the beginning of the meeting tonight.
But they're still showing information that's not quite accurate between the various drawings. We have a garage that doesn't match the plan, a garage elevation that doesn't match the plan, and the two garage elevations don't line up. One has a gable, one has a hip. can't have a gable and a hip on the same roof. So there's just a lot of inconsistencies, and we want to give your project a fair hearing.
No, I understand, but
Yeah.
we had made those changes, and I brought it back to her, and then I think it was approved already for the drawings.
What do you mean it was approved?
I don't know. I came back to your office, and we made the changes, and I didn't see anything other than that. The first time you said that things needed to be changed with my architect, he changed it, and then I brought it back to you.
Right, that was for zoning compliance. So
Oh,
that's
okay.
not what we're talking about right now. What we're talking about is when you look at the different elevations of the latest ones that you provided, that there's things that don't consistently add up. And so, and I'm not an architect, so I apologize that I didn't pick up on all of these things. I will get a list from Mary Beth, who is an architect, so that we can make sure we work all of
Sure,
these
yeah.
things.
Yeah,
If
'cause
I
we-
would have known ahead of time,
I
I'm sure I
know.
would have changed, but now, this is the first time I'm hearing
I know.
about this.
I'm so sorry. But
You know, I thought by making the changes from the first time, I thought I corrected
Yeah.
everything that Melissa asked for.
so we'll get you. I'll get Melissa a list so that you guys can modify the
Sure,
drawings as
sure,
necessary. So
sure.
what we'd like to do is continue
Sure.
the meeting. And what we're thinking about is May.
Let's not throw Melissa under.
I'm not
Let's
throwing
not throw Melissa
Oh,
under
no,
the
no, I
bus, though. Like,
understand.
this is stuff your architect missed
Yeah.
in submitting it.
Yeah.
Okay.
This isn't stuff Melissa is supposed to catch for you,
Right.
but it exists, so let's get it corrected.
Sure.
and-
Yeah, no problem. I mean, we have no problem making changes.
Perfect.
We did it the first time.
Of
so,
course. Yeah. Your architect should have no problem with that. So we're thinking about May 8th. Does May 8th give you enough time? That's 2 weeks.
So I would need the documents by early the Friday before that meeting in order to
And
get it
is there
into
any
the-
time sooner than that? Because, you know, we're going into the construction season, and
I know.
by the time we get permits, I mean, you know, everything's been delayed and every time it's cost us money, so.
I know lumber goes up 30% every week.
Construction cost has gone up. It has
Every
gone
week.
up.
So is the preference the 24th or the 1st for everybody here on the board?
My preference is the first.
Is the 1st. I think the 24th is going to be tough because you got to get this stuff turned around by Friday, which is 4 days. So how about we go with May 1st?
I won't be able to attend that evening.
Okay. But as long as we have 4, yeah, we just need quorum. So are you available on the 1st? Violetta, you're available on the 1st? I'm available, you're available. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and continue this to May 1st. Yes.
Sure,
So that gives you a week and a half
no problem.
Yeah.
at the most.
Yeah,
But I'll get you corrections
sure.
Tomorrow.
Thursday morning. I'm not
Sure.
here tomorrow.
Oh, she's not here tomorrow.
Thursday
Sure.
morning I will.
Mary Beth,
problem.
may I ask the applicant a question based on what I saw on site?
Yes, but let me swear him in then.
Okay.
So can I get you to raise your right hand
Yes.
and tell me that, good Lord, where'd that paper go? I've forgotten how to swear people in without words. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth throughout the course of these proceedings?
I do.
Perfect.
I just have a brief question. So when I was looking at the site, I saw it looked like there was recent trees that had been cut down. Can you
Yes.
describe what the recent activity is in regards to those trees and how many trees have been cut down?
The trees, there was, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 trees that was cut down. It was on the fence side.
And a question to staff, is there a process or a permit that's, no, so those can be cut down as a right?
Correct. We
Okay.
called in and make sure that if we needed to get permit, we're going to get permit.
Okay,
They
so
said
then
there
you
was
were,
no need.
you were just doing that in anticipation of the development?
Yes, we're ready to move forward and
Very
get this
good.
done.
Excellent. Thank you for clarifying that.
No problem.
All right, so I just need a motion to move this forward to a date certain.
I'd like to make a motion to continue case number 18ZMJV0022 to May 1st
At 7 o'clock p.m.?
at 7 o'clock p.m.
I second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So we will see you on May 1st.
Okay.
Thank you so much. We
problem.
appreciate your patience. Yeah.
Let me go first.
Yes, you will be.
It's a special meeting. You should be the only thing on the agenda, right?
Yeah, right now.
Okay, May 1st, so then I'll hear from Melissa then.
Yes. Perfect.
Can I make a motion to adjourn?
Please.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right.
It's been moved, there's a motion. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you very much, everyone.